Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Godlike Naruto summoned by Weiss harem. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by IreJasmine and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Chapter 0. A New Home. In the dimension of the elemental nations, two figures laid in a giant crater created by their strongest and final attack. The two young ninjas breathed heavily while staring at the rain. The two could do nothing more as their bodies were riddled with countless injuries from their fight. The fight to determine whose belief was stronger. The clash of power had taken both ninjas' dominant arms, shredding the limb to nothingness. Now tired, battered and bloodied, the two could honestly smile at one another. For their fight had shown the feelings hidden deep within each other's heart and the two had finally understood one another. Naruto the raven-haired ninja exhaled, his head tilting enough to watch the blonde-whiskered teen stare back at him with a bloodied but triumphant grin and busted nose. "Yes, Sasuke." Naruto replied just as tired as the raven-haired teen, his body feeling colder and less responsive by the second. The raven-haired teen stared hard at Naruto's grin, which caused one of his own to form on his lips. Naruto, for all his faults, had wormed his way into Sasuke's heart and the raven-haired teen had to admit that after everything they had gone through, he had become Sasuke's one true friend and brother in arms. "Thanks," Sasuke whispered, and with just that one word Naruto understood perfectly what Sasuke conveyed and grinned harder if that was possible. Naruto had always thought of Sasuke as his brother and friend and finally, after all the countless battles, deceits and more, the feeling was mutual. It was nothing," Naruto replied with a smirk that faded with the adrenaline wearing off, his body completely unresponsive. Sasuke snorted which made him cough blood. Only the knucklehead Naruto would call 3 years of constant fighting and culmination of clashing with a godlike shinobi and a goddess, nothing the memory of the obnoxiously annoying twerp that Naruto used to be and comparing that to the current Naruto made Sasuke snort again. His true friend was the same obnoxious boy from back then, but he had also matured without losing what made him special. "I think you will be a great Hokage, second best to me," Dobe Sasuke joked, knowing very well that his chances of becoming Hokage had been utterly trashed when he became the bad guy of the story. The raven-haired boy smiled sadly and looked once more at his one true friend. Sasuke's smile disappeared. Naruto was laid on his side, his body facing Sasuke and his left hand outstretched as if he had been trying to reach Sasuke. Naruto's eyes were half-lidded and the light in them was dulled, his skin had lost all color, yet what scared Sasuke the most is that he could not hear or see Naruto breathing. "Naruto?" Sasuke's voice cracked as he called for the blonde, fear creeping into his soul. "Dope, don't play jokes on me," Sasuke added with a bit of hope in his voice, but it quickly died when Naruto didn't give any sort of reply. He called the teen's name again and again, but there was no reply, Naruto just kept laying there with that damned peaceful smile. Sasuke felt tears threatening to escape his eyes as he crawled towards his one true friend, his body trembled as he moved not just because of the pain his body undoubtedly was in, but because of the fear that had gripped his soul. With trepidation Sasuke placed his remaining hand on top of the blonde chest, hoping for any good sign, but there was no heartbeat. Naruto was dead. An anguished wail escaped the raven-haired boy before he hunched over his best friend's corpse, with the dam of his tears breaching open, the pain in his soul numbing all the pain of his body. Cradling the whiskered teen on his arm Sasuke cried hard, harder than when he had lost his family, harder than when Itachi had died. His one and only true friend was dead, with a heavy heart Sasuke swore to the body in his arms that he would accomplish their dream. He would become the best Hokage the elemental nations would ever see, he would bring peace to the world, all in the name of his one and only true friend. Dark. Cold. Empty. The darkness suddenly dispelled in a bright shine of light that blinded Naruto, sensations returned to his body and he gulped a deep breath of air, he blinked several times adjusting to the light that now shone upon him. Seconds passed as he coughed before regaining his bearings, he looked around to find himself stranded in a strange place. Everything above him was white and went as far as the eye could see, his inspection of himself found him to be naked, yet what drew his eyes the most was the murky pool of darkness he stood on. He cautiously lifted 1 foot and ripples traveled through the vast pool, officially freaked out he tried walking in order to find something, anything or anyone. Or at least that's what he tried. For when he moved forward, he felt he moved forward yet his body had not moved an inch. Frowning, he tried running, only for the same sensation to spike and make him double forward holding his head and nursing the nauseous feeling. The moment he recovered his breath dark tendrils shot from the pool and took hold of Naruto's ankles, he panicked and tried jumping away, but his body didn't move at all, and the tendrils kept slowly but surely sinking him into the murky darkness. "The prophecy has been fulfilled," young Naruto Uzumaki an ominous voice resounded throughout the void, and the power within it overwhelmed the struggling ninja. You've been freed from the destiny set upon you. As such, we have decided to give you a new life as reward. It is yours to do as you wish once you're reborn in this new world." "Boy. What do you mean new life?" Naruto shouted in annoyance as his struggles continued, but no voice responded. Naruto panicked more when he noticed that he was already pulled waist deep inside the pool of darkness. He started struggling harder to no avail until he had the bright idea of using his shadow clone jutsu. The chakra melded inside him, filling his body with power and burst out. Too late. Everything went black. "Goodbye Naruto, thank you." Linda Goodwitch, right hand of the headmaster of Beacon Academy and one of the best huntresses in the dimension of Remnant, was currently dressed in nothing more than her plain underwear as she prepared for herself for a warm soak in her bathtub after another long day of work. The headmistress walked in front of the full-body mirror in her bathroom and checked herself. She was tall and had an hergless figure that most men drooled for, yet her body was untouched. Frowning at the thought of her singleness, Glinda discarded the last pieces of clothing covering her body and undid the ponytail holding her long blonde hair. She looked at herself one more time in the mirror and nodded satisfied with what she found. With her inspection over, she opened the door leading to her private bathtub only to pause. Someone was already inside her tub. Eyes shone with fury as she approached the person intent on giving them hell. However, she paused again as she got a clear view of the person. A naked blonde teenager with 3 whiskers, birthmarks on each cheek and 2 contrasting silver wolf ears atop his sun-kissed blonde hair. His face was contorted in a tight grimace and both of his scarred arms were crossed over his chest while he trashed in pain. Concern took over her anger and Glinda rapidly levitated the boy with her semblance to inspect his body. She gasped as she saw the numerous cuts that riddled his entire naked body and almost puked when she saw the 2 most prominent and grotesque wounds. One fist-sized hole right in the middle of his chest which she could see all the way through to the tiles of her bathroom and another fist-sized hole on where his belly button should have been. Shocked that the boy was even alive, Glinda ran out of the bathroom, almost tripping on the carpet on her way, and dug inside her wallet for her scroll. The technological equipment was found in the rush and she speed dialed the only person who would be able to help her at short notice. The tone rang for a second before the person picked the call. "Hello Glinda." The man on the screen looked away for a second, a very light blush crossing his features. He finished with a slight cough to regain his composure. "Osmond, I need help. Now." Glinda roared as she ran back inside the bathroom. Turning her scroll, she pointed the camera towards the whimpering injured teenager and floating above her tub. The blood dripping from his numerous cuts had since long ago turned the water crimson. Osmond, the headmaster of Beacon Academy, raised an eyebrow at the situation his friend found herself in. He entertained the thought of Glinda harming the teen to that extent for peeping on her, but discarded the thought since there was no way she would be calling for help if that was the case. "Treat his wounds as best as you can while the medical team arrives," Osmond replied shortly and cut the call. Glinda blew hot air, looking at the whimpering teen one last time before looking for anything that could help him. She found the first aid med kit hidden in her bathroom and levitated the injured teen low enough that she could properly treat him. She called forth a clean towel and cleaned the blood coating his limbs first to assess how bad it looked before moving on to the 2 holes in his body. She gaped when she noticed the 2 holes weren't bleeding unlike the rest of his wounds, and if possible, it seemed like the flesh was slowly but surely stitching itself back together. Her mind raced a mile per minute and the only explanation she could come up with was that his semblance was a regenerative type and that was the only reason he wasn't dead from how fatal those wounds were. After cleaning his body from the cuts that had seemingly disappeared, Glinda could do nothing more than continue inspecting the teen while she waited for Osmond's help to arrive. His age could be anywhere in between 15 to 16, he had the 2 silver wolf ears that contrasted with his messy blonde hair, 3 whisker-like marks on each cheek and an athletic build. She blinked, finally noticing the long crimson fox tail hanging from his lower back. "How did you get here?" Glinda pondered. However, hurried knocks from the door broke her out of her musings. She wrapped a towel around her figure just before opening the door. The medic team consisted of 3 nurses that rushed to the bathroom, followed shortly by a huge male Franus with bare ears where human ears should be. Glinda trailed after them and watched as they carried the teen out of her room on a stretcher and closed the door. "What the hell just happened?" she mumbled. 3 days had gone by since Glinda had found the teen in her bathtub. Osmond had arranged for the boy to be treated in the Purity Hospital, which was 3 blocks away from Glinda's apartment. The first day had the most hectic one, since she had to explain how the boy had met her and any information she had of the teen. That day she was also kind enough to buy the teen a spare set of clothes, since all he had were the hospital rags that covered nothing. The second day she received the first update of the teen's health and was even more confused than before. "He should be dead by all means," were the words of the head doctor treating him, and Glinda could only agree after being given the long list of injuries the blonde had suffered and somehow healed overnight. Now, on the third day, Glinda had been called because the boy was healing miraculously fast and would be awake anytime soon. The elevator she was in pinged and she headed for the room of the blonde enigma, intent on being the first to interrogate the blonde. Imagine her surprise when she unceremoniously opened the door to his room, finding said blonde enigma in the middle of pulling up his boxers, displaying his naked butt to her. And then he turned around. Slowly. "There, could you give me a minute?" he meekly asked as he finished pulling his boxers up and hiding his junk from her. Despite being a grown woman and having already seen his naked body before, Glinda couldn't help feeling slightly embarrassed from the ordeal. With a cough she left the room, allowing Naruto to finish dressing. A few minutes later Glinda entered the room again, however this time she made sure the teen was fully clothed before entering. She found the boy awkwardly sitting at the edge of the bed with the blue jeans and black shirt she had brought for him. She sat on the chair next to the bed and waited for the boy to start. Naruto decided to start things off on the right foot. No, he was not going to count her seeing him naked their first meeting. His memories were intact, and if what the voice had said in that strange white place was true, and knowing his unlucky type of luck, then it probably meant he really wasn't in his world anymore. With that in mind he cleared his throat. "I'm Naruto, Uzumaki Naruto," the blonde started, awkwardly rubbing the back of his head. "I have no idea where I am, but I was told earlier you took care of me, so thank you." "I am Glinda Goodwitch," the teacher smiled, her eyes softening for a second. "I was quite surprised when I found you in my bathtub looking like you had seen better days. Can you tell me what happened?" she asked, her voice soft but an underlying stern tone in it. Naruto felt a knot form in the back of his throat. How was he supposed to explain that he supposedly died and revived in a new world because of some god's whims? "It's a long story and I know it'll sound false, but please believe in me," Naruto sincerely said with as much honesty he could in his voice. He knew he was taking a big gamble if he told her the complete truth, but she had been the one to help him and he owed her that, and maybe he could start somewhat better in this new world. Besides, if there was something he had learned the hard way was that lying would never get you anywhere, and if the woman sitting in front of him had decided to help him without any prejudice, then he would give her his trust and hope for the best. "It'll depend on what you tell me," Glinda replied, shuffling a bit in the chair to get comfortable. Naruto took that as his cue and started from the very start. He explained his birth and the tragedy that befell his village and his family. Then spoke of the secrets kept from him to protect him and how the shinobi, as he called himself, lived. How he was condemned for something out of his control at the time. His story took a darker turn when the numerous fights and betrayals kept occurring one after another, the attempts at his life and the beast within him almost escaping several times. Then when everything was finally looking up, the madman that had orchestrated the tragedy of his village and had pretty much been the sole reason of every bad thing that happened to Naruto revealed himself, and with him came the fight with the strongest person Naruto had ever known. Madara. He admitted that the only reason they won that fight was because Madara was also betrayed, his power taken away from him by the goddess that had initially granted chakra to the shinobi. Only with the teamwork of his two best friends and help of the original sage had the three sealed the goddess once more. If only it stopped there, Naruto laughed as he explained his last battle with his best friend. Naruto confidently said he had won the battle but lost his life for it. Then he explained what he saw and heard in the empty void before waking up earlier that day to the nurses attending him. Glinda kept her emotions in control for most of the tale. At the start she thought the teen was pulling her leg, but the emotion in his voice and the longing in his eyes as he retold his life were very much real. Over the course of his tale, she had asked short but concise questions that Naruto was easily replied, more of his life and hardships were retold, and Glinda couldn't help being snared by the teen's honesty and willfulness, which slowly but surely won over her heart and allowed her to glimpse the real personality of the shinobi. By the time Naruto had finished his tale, Glinda noticed night had fallen. She pondered over the information she was told as Naruto patiently waited for the woman's verdict. "It's," Glinda started, getting Naruto's full attention. "It's an interesting tale, and as far-fetched as it sounds, I can't help but believe in you." Naruto couldn't hold back his smile. The week passed by in the blink of an eye for the headmistress. During that week she returned every single day and gave company to the otherworldly ninja. She shared part of her past with him, and somehow a bond between the two was formed. That very same bond had grown steadily day after day as Glinda continued spending her time together with the teen. One of the many things they had talked and agreed upon was that Naruto was extremely lucky that whatever god or force had thrown him into this world had been kind enough to implant in his psyche the language of remnant. Currently the two were sitting in Naruto's hospital room while they waited for the doctor to discharge him. Glinda had prepared a small surprise for the young teen and hoped that he wouldn't mind being kept in the dark about it. There was a knock on the door before a middle-aged man entered. He had tousled gray hair and was of light complexion with sharp features. His eyes were covered by shaded spectacles and wore an unzipped black suit over a button vest and green undershirt with a dark green scarf on top and long dark green pants. He walked forward, a cane following his footsteps while he waved a hand that held a coffee mug. "Hello Glinda," the old man saluted with a nod of his mug before focusing on Naruto. "Young man, I'm Osborne," the man friendly said, sipping a bit of his coffee. Naruto the teen acknowledged his greeting, a little creeped out. Naruto sent Glinda a discreet side glance. Glinda caught the glance and understanding that Naruto must feel a little weirded out, she decided to skip Osborne's usual theatrics. "Osborne, did you get the?" Osborne interrupted her with a smile as he pulled out a yellow folder from inside his suit before handing it to her. "Yes, Naruto has been legally accepted as your stepbrother," Osborne mirthfully spoke, chuckling quietly to himself when the headmistress visibly sagged with relief. He turned to Naruto again. "May we meet again under better circumstances, young Naruto." The old man bowed his head lightly to the shinobi, then again for Glinda before leaving the two blondes alone. Naruto blinked several times and tilted his head to Glinda. Of all things he was expecting to happen, that certainly wasn't one of them. Not that I mind," but Naruto trailed off, unsure of how to interpret the older woman's actions. The shinobi could count with both hands the amount of people who had been genuinely kind to him and have leftover fingers, so he was extremely glad that the first person he met in this new world was such a kind woman. "I understand your unease, but rest assured I did it for your own good. There's many things you have to learn from this world, and there's something about you that has caught my attention." Glinda fixed a strand of hair behind her ear. "I believe doing this would help you and also help me understand why I feel attracted to you." "Thank you." Naruto's smile caused Glinda's tense shoulders to relax. The two paid a quick visit to the doctor who had treated the teen before leaving the hospital for good, Naruto owing, as the two walked through the streets of Vale. During the week they spent together, Glinda had taught him various things about the world and the technology of remnant, yet seeing it firsthand was a novel experience for Naruto. Glinda answered his questions with ease and even laughed at Naruto's antics, the strange bond that had formed between the two being strong enough for both to reveal more of their true natures without feeling awkward. They passed by various stores on the way back to Glinda's apartment, the headmistress laughing as Naruto had a harder time deciding between which type of raiment he would get than choosing his extra spare of clothes. Naruto promised Glinda that once he learned enough about this world and could stand on his own that he would pay back her kindness. Glinda accepted his promise and added that he shouldn't hold back for now and get whatever he wished. There was some hesitation until she showed her bank account to the teen. After that it was smooth sailing, since his expenses barely scratched the tip of the iceberg, that is Glinda's goodwill pockets. Half a day of shopping later the two stopped in front of a 20-story tall, sophisticated building. The lobby was made of see-through glass that left Naruto so flabbergasted that Glinda had to push the shinobi inside and towards the reception desk. Most of the building's staff were acquaintances of the headmistress and waved their greetings from afar. She returned them with a slight nod and a neutral face, however she had a harder time keeping her poker face under the judgmental stares of the female population, but she managed to keep it up until the two were inside the elevator. Glinda hit the penthouse button and to her surprise, the shinobi didn't seem to have any problem with the elevator vertigo feeling. A ding followed by the elevator doors sliding open and both occupants walked down the long hall. Finding the door to Glinda's apartment after rounding a corner, she slid her scroll on the door scanner. There was a click and Glinda pushed the door fully open, but before they moved, she turned around, giving Naruto one of her warmest and rarest smiles. "Welcome to your new home, Naruto." Glinda welcomed the shinobi. Naruto nodded as he tried to fight back the tears that threatened to escape his eyes from the mixed feelings, yet he smiled back. Home huh? Chapter end. Chapter 1. The start of a new journey. 2 months had passed by since Naruto started living with Glinda as his surrogate brother, and the shinobi could honestly say that their arrangement had worked out for the best. The headmistress had taken a month off work to focus on teaching Naruto everything he would need to know about the world of remnant, and while he was never one for the academics, he learned fast under her strict lessons. He had been fascinated by how advanced the technology of this world was compared to his own, sadly that didn't include the time needed to microwave his instant ramen. As they say, win some, lose some. Naruto chuckled as he picked a chocolate from the stand next to him. He was currently doing the groceries for the following month at the request of Glinda, since the headmistress' emergency number had been called and she had to run off to fix whatever issue had arisen. He pushed forward the cart filled with the supplies when something yanked his new and forelimb. Blinking, the blonde turned his head curiously and found a small girl, probably 6 to 7, tightly hugging his fluffy foxtail with one hand and a teddy in the other. Naruto chuckled to himself as he crouched down to her level and asked her a question, but her response was to snuggle deeper into his tail. "Lea. Where are you?" Naruto heard the distinctive shout of an upset woman, glancing at the girl on cloud 9 and making the connections easily, he lifted the child up and set her on his shoulders. The child squealed as Naruto wiggled his animal ears and were quickly seized by the gleefully laughing child. "Let's go find your mother, okay?" The blonde said and took the girl giggles as an affirmation. Pushing the cart out of the cashier line, he looked around for a bit and found a woman in her early 30s talking with one of the store staff members, no doubt asking for help in finding her missing daughter. He made his way through the crowd of people that had formed around to help the distraught mother until he was behind the frantic woman. "Excuse me," Naruto poked the woman's shoulder, gaining her attention. "I think you might be looking for her." Naruto pointed at the happily squealing girl that toyed with his wolf ears. The group of adults held their breaths as the lady trembled before quickly snatching the girl away from Naruto's shoulders and hugged her tightly to her bosom. "Oh, my little Leanne. I'm so glad you're okay," the woman hiccuped as she rubbed her nose with her daughters before turning to Naruto. Thank you," the lady said as she gave Naruto a tearful smile. He grinned and rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. "It was nothing," Naruto said as he patted the girl on her head, "and you stay out of trouble." He lightly chided the child who only giggled back before returning to the nearest pay file again. The shinobi fished his brand new scroll from his pocket and started to read on the news while he waited. He skipped the over-clickbait titles all the way down to things that really caught his attention. Most of the stuff buried at the end were about the Faunus White Fang activities in Vale and his personal favorite, the gardening news. While many wouldn't believe Naruto to be a gardener, he always had a green thumb since his childhood, and his connection to the world via Sage Mode had only increased his appreciation for nature. Memories of the elemental nations flashed through his mind, and the shinobi smiled sadly. He idly entertained the thought and wondered what his friends were up to since his death, but his musings were cut short as the line moved forward again, and he was the next to pay. It didn't take long to ring all his purchases and press his scroll against a scanner to pay, a quiet ping with his receipt being printed later. Naruto picked the store bags and left the grocery store. Right outside was a bus stall with a long bench which he sat upon and patiently waited for a taxi to pass by. Or at least that's what he tried to. Various people walking by sent Naruto discreet glances. Vale may be one of the cities that treats Faunus well, but that was compared to how trashy everywhere else they were treated, especially with the White Fang attacks occurring more often. His wolf ears dropped slightly when someone his own age sneered at him. One of the very first things Glinda taught him about Remnant were the different races inhabiting the globe in order of quantity. The grim monster of the dark living nightmares that were fueled by humanity's and Faunus' despair. The humans, the supposedly original abundant race that was slowly culled by the Grim until they were forced into hiding and building concentrated cities that could repel back the attacks. And lastly, the Faunus. A race of humanoid people that possessed physical traits similar or identical to animals. Because of this, the humans tended to treat Faunus as if they were beasts without feelings. Even after the implementation of Faunus civil rights, there were many demeaning the Faunus species and, if possible, repel the laws protecting their rights. The main reason the Faunus were mistreated was not only for their physical difference to humans, but also for the way their animalistic traits affected their brains. In exchange for the Faunus species obtaining animal traits, they also received animalistic instincts. It could be debated that humans had just as many animalistic instincts as Faunus, but that would take years for the discussion to end, simply because humans could not coexist with other humans, and now add in a species that was more in touch with their instincts. It was very well known that humans could breed with Faunus, just like Faunus could breed with humans. The children of these unions would either be fully human or fully Faunus. The genes themselves did not allow for a half and half type of union at the molecular level, but that did not mean that humanity did not label them as such. Of course, if things only went that far, there should have been a breakthrough years ago, but the issue arose from the special types of Faunus that existed. The special type to which Naruto belonged to. Faunus that bred with other Faunus normally had children that inherited only one of their parent traits, just like when humans and Faunus bred, the genes made sure to never mix and only pass down one trait. However, there were cases that mutations occurred which caused the child of two Faunus with different traits to inherit both of his parent traits. Something that also doubled how in touch these special children were with their instincts. Both the Faunus and the humans labeled these type of Faunus as hybrids, belonging to neither species as they were abominations that were so close to animals and human bodies that they may as well be treated exactly like the Grim. Glinda had carefully explained that even if hybrids were born and raised like a proper human, they still would not be able to control their emotions like a normal person, and there would come a time where they would simply lash out and cause big accidents. That was not to say there were not any hybrids around, but the quantity that was in their adult stages was barely in the hundreds, and most children had to take specialized medication to help them retain their rationality through their puberty. Somehow, someway, whatever god or force had thrown Naruto into this world had decided to send him with one last fuck you, because as his luck would have it, Naruto was a hybrid. But silver wolf ears that looked so out of place with his blonde hair and a crimson foxtail that was half as tall as he was and just as robust, anyone from a mile away would notice that he was a hybrid. The stares, the hushed whispers, the silent treatment, and sometimes barely hidden contempt was the same as when he was a child blamed for being a demon, about which he had not known. Glinda speculated that just maybe, Naruto was meant to start his life over from his birth, but the gods had fucked up. Naruto, with Glinda's speculation, thought that he was meant to be reborn as a wolf faunus, but his close connection in his previous world with Kurama may have interfered to the point where he also inherited the sentient chakra's animal traits. At least his animal features were extremely fluffy and served as great hugging pillows, his surrogate sister could attest to that. One not discriminative taxi later and Naruto was back at the apartment he called home, he greeted the receptionist with his trademark grin, to which the lady waved back enthusiastically before he took the elevator. The personnel of the apartment had been initially surprised when Glinda announced Naruto would be living with her, and they had treated him with slight trepidation, but as the days passed and Naruto met more of them, they had quickly warmed up to his natural charismatic nature. The doors opened and Naruto stepped into the penthouse hallway where he was pleasantly surprised to see Glinda about to enter their home. At first it had been slightly awkward living with the older woman, but the two had promptly worked out their differences and found themselves enjoying each other's company. So much that Naruto played pranks on her. "Yo!" Naruto exclaimed loud enough to make the headmistress jump in place and level a glare at him as he silently snickered. Naruto approached the glaring woman, laying down the bags by the door entrance before giving her a tight hug that was crossly returned. Fast forwarding 3 months, many things had happened. First, Naruto had started an arduous physical regimen after he found out that his body no longer held chakra, nor could he mold it, instead there were new sources of energy circulating through his body. One was easily identified by Glinda, it was aura, the main energy that everyone in Remnant was born with and manipulated to an extent. The next two were very well known to Naruto yet felt alien at the same time, he could feel both his physical energy and spiritual energy, but unlike in the elemental nations, he could not mix the two to create chakra. The last source of energy within him vastly overpassed all 3 previous ones and made them feel like a bottle of water next to an ocean. The problem with this last energy was that it felt twisted, corrupted, and dark, almost as if the entire world's hatred had been bundled into a tight ball and shoved into the shinobi's body. Naruto trained harder than when he had first mastered Sage Mode because of the imbalance of energies within him, which led to the discovery that he could access Sage Mode by balancing the world's natural energy with his own twisted one. His continuous training and experimentation with the energies within him allowed him to manipulate the aura within him to the same potential of his lost chakra. His expertise allowed him to manipulate to such an extent that he could physically alter his body with aura. An ability that he quickly mastered and used to hide behind aura both of his Franus traits. It didn't long after mastering aura that Naruto's semblance was awakened, and with it came many discoveries that were both disturbing and astonishing. Glinda was forced more than once to interrupt Naruto's experimentation with his semblance when he tried to test its limits and caused harm to himself. She tried forcing various promised out of Naruto, but very few were accepted. With how potent and different from the norm Naruto's semblance was, Glinda admitted that it only added more proof to his story of being an otherworldly person. Of course, Glinda was not the only one to learn of Naruto's semblance. Ozpin had been informed of the teen's incredible growth, and with the older man interest peaked, he had visited several times to talk with Naruto, but always left with half answers. Glinda, for the first time in her life, had gone against Ozpin's wishes and kept secret Naruto's real origins. Thankfully the headmaster always accepted that Naruto couldn't tell him his origins, but eagerly awaited the day he could be trusted enough to know of them. When Naruto felt he hit the final wall in his training and could no longer learn anything by meditating or experimenting at home, he made a request to Glinda which the woman had to run through Ozpin first. The headmaster easily accepted the request, something that rang alarm bells in Glinda's mind but could do nothing about except for keeping her eyes on both Ozpin and Naruto. After all, it would not be the first time Ozpin had a hidden agenda of his own. With his request approved, Naruto accompanied Glinda to her huntsman duties and missions in order to learn what kind of job it was and use the opportunity to train himself in the field. The first mission the two went together was a grim extermination outside of Vale, and when Naruto was given permission to test himself against the monster of the dark, he felt his animalistic instincts flare up to the point they matched his insanity under an unmastered Kurama's tailed cloak. If Naruto had not mastered Kurama's addictive chakra back then, he would have surely lost it and become another monster alike the ones he killed that day. For the very first time Naruto understood why humans and Franus were afraid of hybrids. If this was the kind of things they felt when their emotions ran wild, there was no way they wouldn't be discriminated against. It was simply impossible without proper peace of mind and training to go against such raw emotions. Still Naruto pushed through, steadily taming his new animalistic side, and in one of accompanying Glinda to grim extermination missions, let Naruto make a name for himself in the village surrounding the city of Vale. Glinda was pleasantly surprised by how strong Naruto was, and that was without a proper weapon or team to help him. She had very often let him take complete control of the situation to as his skills formed the sidelines, and every new mission the shinobi was better and better. She was so impressed that she prepared another surprise to help him become even better in the future. The surprise was given to Naruto on his 16th birthday. Glinda had prepared a simple cake for him that day, and along with it gave him the surprise she had prepared. The weapon. Naruto was so deeply moved by Glinda's attentiveness that he couldn't hold back and gave the woman a strong hug that lifted her off the floor and peppered her cheeks with kisses. Glinda's cheeks had turned red under his emotional outburst that she quietly enjoyed until he let her down to inspect his new weapon. The weapon was a sword, a katana to be exact. An allusion to his previous life. The katana was exactly 100 centimeters long, the handle taking 25 centimeters and the blade 75 centimeters. Both pieces were black in color and the sheath was slightly bulkier since it had room for optimizations, but silver colored that matched the color of his wolf ears. His excitement overflowed once more and Glinda was on the receiving end of it until she put her foot down and was forced to use her semblance to throw Naruto against the ceiling, hard enough to make a crack in the material. Although Naruto never was one for the sword's arts, preferring to use his fists, the creatures of the Grim were monsters that without empowering his naked fists with energy he couldn't normally slay, so he trained. His semblance helped him greatly and in no time, Naruto had created his own style that matched his newfound ferocity with the help of Glinda and more exterminations missions. The two had completed so many that word of an unregistered hunter completing missions made its way to the upper echelons of the council, that to avoid any repercussions that may befell Glinda for allowing such a thing to happen, Naruto with Ozpin's help had created a fake persona. With the older man's help, Naruto created an outfit that would hide his identity and he worked non-stop on creating a weapon that he would be able to use as Naruto and not the fake Menma persona he created that worked with Glinda's weapon. The project for the new weapon took various months to complete and by the time he had finished his project, December had already arrived and with it came the snowy winter. Now that his project was complete and he was ready to continue doing missions with Glinda, Naruto had formally requested Ozpin to instate him as huntsman of Vale, but to the shinobi's surprise, the older man declined his request without giving him any reason as to why. Naruto sighed for the umpteenth time that day as he returned to the apartment after buying some ramen at the store nearby. He took off his shirt and threw it in his room before moving to the kitchen and taking the ingredients for the night's meal. Cooking had become one of the new things the shinobi enjoyed doing, and with Glinda's help, he took over the cooking duties to give more free time to the overworked woman. Naruto placed the scroll on the counter and dialed Glinda. He thought about how hectic his life was while he prepped the ingredients. Naruto failed to graduate at the academy at the age of 10, successfully becoming a shinobi at the age of 12. In 6 months, he participated in the Chunin exams and then went to train with Jiraiya for a year and a half, returning only when he was 14 and almost mastered Sage Mode. Then he was involved with the madness that started the Fourth Shinobi War that culminated 3 months after his 15th birthday and his unexpected death. Or his supposed death, since he was literally thrown to Remnant alone where Glinda found him and the rest is history. The call connected through and snapped the blonde out of his thoughts. Looking at the screen he could see Glinda with a small frown as the teacher hastily spoke with someone else before turning to face the camera. As soon as she saw Naruto on the other end, the frown was replaced by a smile. Hey, Naruto greeted with an amused smile as he picked up the scroll. I just got back home and I'm about to start dinner, what would you like? The teacher raised a hand to her chin as she thought over the question. I guess pasta would be good, we haven't had that in a while, and she abruptly stopped and the sound of her crop smacking flesh was heard, followed by a male pain groan. As I was saying before being interrupted, I also have some very good news. There was the sound of the crop again, followed by a string of curses from the same male voice, and then it went silent. Good riddance. I should arrive home soon. A short goodbye, and the call was over. Naruto laughed as he prepared the meal, letting his mind wander all over the place. He wondered what could have caused such malicious energy to flow within him and if it was connected with his missing tenant, since it felt like Kurama's undiluted chakra but didn't at the same time. Remembering that the giant fox was nowhere to be found within him, Naruto cut that depressing line of thought and moved on to another one. The faces of the various people he had met since his arrival drifted in his mind. Some of those people had become regulars in his daily life and most of them had taken a shine to him, but there were also some who discriminated against him since they knew of his hybrid status and didn't give him an opportunity to befriend them. Naruto snickered since those that had been too obvious with their discrimination were promptly served their own medicine via Naruto's oldest but most effective tactic. Pranks. Rubber chickens, eggs, flour and white sheets were sufficient to scare any of those assholes enough that they doubted their own shadows. Laughing to himself again, Naruto was startled by the sound of the penthouse door closing. Walking out of the kitchen and down the hall, the teen saw Glinda trading her heels for flip-flops. With a grin he gave his surrogate sister a warm welcome hug which Glinda gracefully reciprocated. "Welcome back," Naruto murmured as he released the older woman. "Thank you," Glinda replied with a faint smile before moving into her room. Naruto went back to the kitchen to keep an eye on the stove until Glinda returned in her home clothes, an off-shoulder white blouse and black shorts that accentuated her cleavage, toned waist and long thighs. She sat by the counter and crossed her legs while she looked at the grinning Naruto. Their usual routine of asking how was the other's day played with Naruto teasing Glinda about her BDSM tendencies when she captured criminals and Glinda firing back with Naruto's savagery made the two laugh. The dinner was cooked shortly after and they moved to the dinner table to eat, continuing their back and forth that made them look more like an arguing couple than brother and sister with how personal their choices of words were. Naruto finished his share first, patting his belly happily as he patiently waited for Glinda to finish. She did at a much more sedated pace. Once done, Naruto took both plates to the sink before returning with 2 glasses of water and sitting in front of his surrogate sister and gave her his complete attention. "Osban has decided to accept your request of becoming an official huntsman." Glinda raised a hand before Naruto could get too excited, "but there are 2 conditions you must complete before he certifies you." Naruto frowned. "Those are? The first is that you will undergo a 1-year probation directly under Osban's orders, and the second is that once that year is over, you will join Beacon Academy for 2 years minimum." Glinda sighed deeply, rubbing her forehead tiredly. "I honestly don't understand why he's making you join Beacon, since you're far above anything that can be taught there." Naruto mulled the conditions in silence, his ability to see beyond the unexpected, allowing to discern Osban's probable thoughts. Since Naruto, and by proxy Glinda, had not told Osban about Naruto's real origin, the headmaster thought of him as an untrustworthy individual. 1 year under the headmaster orders would give enough time for the man to learn about Naruto and decide whether or not the shinobi was someone Osban could trust without knowing of his secret. As for joining Beacon, from what he was taught by Glinda, most huntsmen worked in groups until tragedy separated them or their goals did not match any longer, so the only reason he could think of being sent there was that Osban wanted to find someone who would work with Naruto that was closer to his age. "That's all right, I guess. It's the only way that I can become a huntsman without wasting too much time." Naruto scratched the back of his head sheepishly. "Besides, once I'm in Beacon and Osban sees how strong I truly am compared to others, he'll wish not giving me such foolish conditions, believe it." Naruto grinned. Glinda exasperatedly sighed, but smiled at Naruto's antics nonetheless. She told the teen to wait for a moment while she went to her room to get the folder Osban had given her in case Naruto accepted. On her way back, she passed by a cabinet that contained her alcoholic beverages and without thinking much picked one of the strongest ones out. She placed both the bottle of alcohol and the folder on the table, the latter which was slid towards Naruto, while Glinda served her first glass. Glinda knew the contents inside the folder and they were the reason she downed her glass in one go before serving herself more as Naruto read its contents. If Naruto accepted Osban's conditions, he would start working under Osban the very next day, his first mission leading him to Vacuo to investigate some newfound ruins in the desert. Her second glass was downed, the liquid burning down her throat as Naruto finished reading and anxiously looked at Glinda's flushed face. "I'll miss you," Glinda slurred, her low alcohol tolerance working against her. "I don't want you to leave." The boy she had grown extremely fond of and lived together with for the past 10 months was leaving so suddenly. All the memories they shared, the missions, the meals, the pranks, the mishaps, they all would stop. Naruto looked down sadly. "But I know I can't stop you," Glinda whispered as she nursed her third glass. The alcohol had completely crumbled the wall protecting Glinda's emotions, her feelings rising to the surface, making the normally strict woman tremble. "I only ask that once this is all over you return safely to me." Naruto's heart throbbed painfully, but his resolve was set. If he wanted to pay back for everything that Glinda had given him and find his own place in this new world, then he would need to do this. "Can you promise me that?" Glinda nursed her 5th glass as Naruto moved to sit beside her and half-hugged Glinda before taking the glass from her hands and drinking what would have been her 6th shot. His face crunched as the strong liquid burnt his throat, but Naruto endured it after a second of discomfort. "It's a promise." "Thank you," Glinda nodded, her trembling stopped as she burrowed deeper into Naruto's half-hug. That night the two blondes spent it cuddling together, sitting on the chairs and falling asleep in their uncomfortable position, yet neither cared for that. The next morning, Naruto stood by the door with a big suitcase beside him and a small backpack slung across his shoulder. He was dressed in a black polo shirt with a swirl on his chest, blue faded jeans and checkered Vans. Sullenly clinging onto him was a disheveled Glinda. "Take care," Glinda whispered sadly as she hugged the shinobi tightly. "Yeah, you too," Naruto murmured and embraced Glinda, giving her a kiss on the cheek before he separated from her and steeled his resolve one more. Another one-year training trip, but unlike the last one. He would be truly alone. Chapter 2. Introductions and a Kiss. Legends, stories gathered through time. Mankind has grown quite fond of recounting the exploits of heroes and villains, forgetting as easily that we are remnants, byproducts of a forgotten past. A young man leaped from one rooftop to another in the city of Vale. He had been secretly following a bullhead that his current target was using for her own gains. The airship was docked in one of the back alleys of the city. Man, born from dust, was strong, wise and resourceful, but he was born into an unforgiving world. When he saw Roman Torchwick emerge from the cockpit, he knew his spy information to be true. Lackeys followed the known criminal, and unknown to them, the young man continued following them in the dark. An inevitable darkness, creatures of destruction. The creatures of Grimm set their sight on man and all his creations. These forces clashed, and it seemed the darkness was intent on returning man's brief existence to the void. He sent a message via his scroll before he followed the criminal group until they arrived at the Dust Till Down shop. The criminals prepared their weapons, and with a flick of Torchwick's cane, they went into the shop. However, even the smallest spark of hope is enough to ignite change, and in time man's passion, resourcefulness and ingenuity led them to the tools that would even the odds. This power is appropriately named Dust. The young man waited, preparing his own weapon to help if things took a turn for the worse for the poor owner of the shop. His fears were unfounded as one goon smashed through the shop's window, shattering the glass and rolling unconscious. Nature's wrath in hand, man lit their way through the darkness, and in the shadow's absence came strength, civilization and most importantly life. A young person dressed in a black blouse, black waist cincher with red lacing and a skirt with red trimmings, completed by a red hooded cloak, leaped from the broken window and knocked out the remaining goons one by one with a weapon that caught the man's attention. But even the most brilliant light eventually flickers and die, and when they're gone, darkness will return. She fought well and in minutes had left only Torchwick conscious, the criminal puffing his cigar and pointed his cane at the girl. A missile shot but exploded before it met the girl. It released a smoke cloud that Torchwick used to make his getaway. "So, you may prepare your guardians, build your monuments to a so-called free world." The red-haired girl recovered rapidly and spotted Torchwick climbing the stairs of a nearby building. She followed and seemingly cornered Torchwick once again on the rooftop. The young man saw the two speak before the bullhead he had chased earlier appeared behind Torchwick. The man laughed as he boarded the airship. "But take heed, there will be no victory in strength." End of the line, read. Torchwick taunted from inside the bullhead. The criminal threw a fire dust crystal to the rooftop and aimed at it. Ruby froze as the dust crystal bounced under her, eyes widening when the criminal wasted no time and fired at the crystal. Ruby closed her eyes expecting to be engulfed in an explosion. But it never came. HMPH, the voice of a mature woman beside her startled Ruby. She opened her eyes to find a tall woman with blonde hair protecting her from the explosion, with a barrier made of aura. The blonde woman didn't wait for the explosion to end before she retaliated. Waving her riding crop, the woman summoned sharp arrows of aura behind her and shot them back at the bullhead. Torchwick stumbled inside the airship, groaning in annoyance as another busybody poked their nose where they didn't belong. The blonde woman didn't let up. Another wave of her riding crop created a dark cloud appear above the bullhead, which was quickly pelted by icicles firing from the cloud and further destabilizing the airship. Torchwick cursed and ran to the cockpit, alerting his contractor of the woman holding them back. Said contractor huffed and gave control of the airship to Torchwick. She walked to the edge of the cockpit and stared hard at the blonde woman. The contractor body was the only thing visible, dressed in a suggestive dark red, off-the-shoulders mini dress with yellow designs that lit up as the woman used her own semblance to create a ball of fire in the shape of a cherry blossom. The blonde woman barely had a second to react as the fire flowers suddenly blasted towards them. She hastily erected another barrier that blocked the dispersed the blast. However, the petals exploded into tiny pieces that fell to the rooftop before exploding in a pillar of flame that engulfed the barrier and blocked the view to the outside. The contractor laughed as she continued staling for time with the pillar of flame keeping the women and teen trapped until her focus was broken by metal tubes levitating from the rooftop and being shot at the bullhead. She growled and fired smaller fireballs that intercepted the pieces of metal. "Ready?" Torchwick shouted from the cockpit, and the contractor smiled triumphantly. With a burst of concentrated power, she created 3 fire flowers more that exploded into more pillars of flame that left no choice for the blonde woman but to protect herself and the team behind her. Just as the bullhead stabilized and the thrusters surged with power, the young man watching from the shadows acted. He landed on the nose of the airship and frightened Torchwick, the young man's features revealed by the moonlight. Blonde hair, silver wolf ears, a grey hooded cloak with various loosened belts that fell below his knees, a white fox mask covered his face, and what frightened Torchwick was the weapon in the young man's hands. A mechanical heavy-looking wicked giant orange scythe with chains wrapped around the shaft, the man spun the weapon with ease twice above him and in the blink of an eye, made 2 slices that cleanly cut the airship wings off. Torchwick panicked and shouted for help, his contractor being caught by surprise by the sudden descent of the airship fared no better. The young man acted again. Several crimson chains sprouted from the man's back that wrapped around the falling bullhead, which immediately hooked onto the rooftop surrounding the falling bullhead and stopped its fatal descent. The man swung his scythe again, stabbing the wicked weapon onto the airship's roof and peeling the metal apart with ease. He gazed down the opening and found his target. Azure slit eyes met Amber's slit eyes. There caught the young man crouched on the ceiling, his hands resting on his knees as he maintained eye contact. Really? The woman brushed her black hair back, smiling coyly at the masked man. The man's words were interrupted by the sound of an engine flaring alive. He barely had a second to react as a motorcycle suddenly drifted around the coy woman who blew him a kiss before being lifted like a sack of potatoes by Torchwick, who was driving the bike. Torchwick shouted, throwing another fire dust crystal right at the motorcycle exhaust and revved the machine. The sparks ignited the crystal and made the masked man leap back as the explosion burst through the sliced ceiling. Shit. The man swore under his breath after recovering and leaped down to the streets. He aimed at the retreating motorcycle with a sniper integrated in his side but hesitated at the last second. The young man heard footsteps that he easily recognized. Turning, he saw the red-haired girl that trashed Torchwick's goons and the blonde huntress walking towards him. Mister, can I touch your weapon? Please, please, please. The red-haired girl's eyes were glittering and her fingers wriggled in weird motions as she approached the weapon stabbed on the concrete. Naruto blinked, tilting his head as he ignored the possible innuendo from the girl's words and gave her a nod. He lifted the weapon and stabbed it upright, the massive construct dwarfing the girl by an entire meter. As the girl squealed and harassed his side, the young man lifted his mask and smiled warmly at the huntress who had crossed her arms, pushing her corset upwards as she smiled back. "I'm back," the whiskered teen tightly embraced the slightly taller woman. "Welcome back," Naruto Glinda whispered, returning the warm embrace and silently enjoying the growth Naruto had experienced since she had last seen him. Back then Glinda needed to look down whenever she wore heels, but now the shinobi nose tickled the side of her neck and she was sure that if she wasn't wearing heels, they'd be almost the same height. "It's good to be back." Naruto tightened the hug for a second before withdrawing with a content smile. He turned back to the girl harassing his weapon hair. "Ed, we need you to come with us for a bit." "Yes. I hope you realize that your actions tonight will not be taken lightly, young lady, you put yourself and others in great danger." Glinda chided as she walked around the red-haired girl, scroll in hand as she replayed the footage of Ruby's fight caught by the street security cameras. "If it were up to me, you'd be sent home with a pat on the back." Ruby smiled hopefully. "And a slap on the wrist." Glinda tried to slap the girl's hands with her crop but failed, huffing she fixed her glasses. "But there is someone who would like to meet you." Glinda nursed her throbbing forehead as she went to Naruto's side, the shinobi quietly snickering while he watched the scene play. Osmond theatrically appeared from the shadows with a tray of cookies and his signature coffee mug. He placed the tray on the table and motioned for the girl to dig in. "Ruby Rose, you have silver eyes," Osmond commented, leaning his face slightly to watch the girl's eyes before sitting down and crossing his arms. Ruby shifted awkwardly in her seat. "Where did you learn to do this?" Osmond asked as he pointed at the scroll replaying the footage of Ruby's short fight. "Signal Academy," Ruby replied, examining one of the cookies. "They taught you how to use one of the most wicked weapons ever designed?" Osmond asked, concerned that the villages outside the safety walls were driven to the point of teaching how to use one of the most effective weapons for culling Grim. "Well, one teacher in particular," Ruby replied, awkwardly taking a bite of the cookie. "I see." Osmond breathed in relief. "I've only seen 2 other scythe wielders with your kind of skills, a dusty old crow and young Naruto over there." Naruto waved at the girl with a grin. "Cosmon call." Ruby chirped, swallowing the piece of cookie she had eaten. "Sorry, Crow's my uncle, he's a part-time teacher at Signal and I was complete garbage before he took me in," she bashfully smiled. Osmond chuckled. "Is that so? And why is such an adorable girl such as yourself training to become a warrior with such a wicked weapon?" Naruto curiously tilted his head. That was a question he also wanted to ask the young girl, especially after seeing how skillful she was taking out Torchwick's goons. "Well, I want to be a huntress," Ruby exclaimed with a smile. "You want to slay monsters?" Osmond raised an eyebrow, pointing at the girl's choice of weapon. "It's not just that." Ruby pouted. "My parents always taught me and my sister that we ought to help others, so I thought I might as well make a career out of it." Osmond gave her a knowing smile which encouraged the girl to continue. "I mean, the police are alright, but huntsmen and huntresses are just so much more romantic and exciting and gosh, you know." Ruby squeaked, jittering with emotions barely held back. Naruto snorted and Glinda continued nursing her forehead, the headmistress worried for the future of humanity if most aspiring huntresses had the same view as the girl. Being a huntsman was not romantic at all, if anything, the job sent you to an early death. Osmond chuckled, it's not all a bed of roses. Ruby frowned at the old man insinuation. Do you know who I am? Osmond asked once Ruby had calmed down and digested his words. You're Professor Osmond. You're the headmaster of Beacon Academy, Ruby replied. Hello, Osmond cunningly smiled. Nice to meet you, Ruby replicated his smile. You want to come to my school? Osmond tapped the scroll, stopping the footage, and ominously leaned forward on the table. More than anything, Ruby steeled her resolve under the headmaster's suffocating stare. Seconds passed before Osmond eased the pressure he was exerting and leaned back with a satisfied smile. The older man glanced at Glinda and Naruto. Glinda rolled her eyes and looked away, crossing her arms in clear disagreement, while Naruto gave a curt nod. Osmond chuckled to himself, with the democratic vote being 2-1, he smiled at Ruby. Well, consider yourself approved. Really? Really? Just like that? Yes. Yahoo! Ruby gleefully shouted, jumping from her seat and triumphantly danced around the room. While the girl cheerfully danced, Osmond approached his two co-workers. I do not like this, Glinda instantly spoke once the man was within earshot. Give her a chance, she will surprise you, Osmond chuckled. Welcome back, Naruto, how was your journey? Naruto scratched his cheek but spoke with a serious tone. A lot of things happened and we're going to have to sit down and have a long chat about all of what I saw. Osmond nodded. And your thoughts on joining the academy? Naruto crossed his arms, after seeing so many things out there I don't think it's such a bad idea anymore, but I won't stay there for long. That's more than I can ask, Osmond gratefully replied. Would you kindly escort Miss Rose while I finish the paperwork with Glinda? Naruto accepted, surprising the sulking headmistress with a quick hug before herding the still cheering young girl out of the room. He's matured, Osmond commented after he was left alone with Glinda. But he has, Glinda pridefully agreed. Ruby happily skipped beside Naruto as they walked outside of the police building, the red-themed girl discreetly checking the older teen. He was taller than her, the grey cloak with loose belts he wore hid his inner clothes and weapon, but what was left visible tickled Ruby's memories. There was a white fox mask sitting atop the right side of his head hiding one of the wolf ears, 3 whiskers on each cheek, and he wore no shoes which displayed black painted toenails. You're one hell of a fighter, Naruto suddenly complimented Ruby, startling the girl. Thank you. Ruby recovered quickly, but I couldn't do much there, that criminal still escaped. Naruto shook his head. That was partially my fault, but that's not what I'm talking about. You fought well against his goons, even outnumbered. Ruby tilted her head, smiling pridefully. Oh, that was nothing. Naruto chuckled. I noticed. How do you feel about becoming a Beacon student so young? Ruby hid bashfully, rubbing her nose. I'm still riding the high, can't believe my dream is one step closer. What's your dream if you don't mind me asking? Naruto asked, pointing at an open cafe across the street. To become a huntress like my mother used to be, Ruby fondly smiled, recalling the faint memories of her deceased mother as the two entered the cafe and sat at a table near the windows. Naruto noted the girl using past tense. She must have been one hell of huntress if you're this strong at your age. Ruby gleefully smiled at the compliment to both her and her late mother. She was. Her dream was to one day vanquish the Grim and let humanity prosper together once more. Naruto was hit by a wave of memories of his younger self having a similar dream, an admirable dream, one I'm sure we can make reality if we all work together. He asked with a knowing smile. Ruby's smile widened more. If possible, yes, that's exactly it. How do you know? Just a hunch, Naruto chuckled, ordering 2 iced coffees and strawberry shortcakes. Ruby's brain suddenly clicked and her eyes widened as she finally recognized the person sitting in front of her. You're the Reaper. Naruto snorted amusedly. What could possibly give it away? Ruby blushed aside. Then your features, I'm so dumb it took me so long to recognize you. Well, it's not like you have seen me before, so don't be too hard on yourself. Aha, right, could I have your autograph? Ruby shyly asked. Even as far away as Signal was from Vale, the stories of Menma the Reaper were told. How one young huntsman had successfully solo cleared over 500 extermination missions in 1 year, culling the Grim with his wicked weapon for breakfast and saving damsels in distress for dinner. The stories might be obviously exaggerated, but the public records of his missions were available for the tech-savvy and proved most of his accomplishments were the real deal. To think that she would one day be sitting with the famous Menma the Reaper, conversing about her dreams and complimenting her while they ate cakes, had suddenly become her reality. The young girl could do nothing but make the best out of her situation. Naruto laughed hard, complying with the younger girl's wishes and writing his name on a napkin. Ruby took the napkin, admiring his rough handiwork before stowing the napkin safely in her purse. What is like being a huntsman like you? Naruto rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Like me, huh? It's bad, really, really bad. whatever you are thinking of is wrong. Ruby frowned. How come? Well, for one, the stories they tell of me do not speak of the casualties involved in the missions. The council always tries to underpay your hard work. When people start to believe you're invincible, they send you to impossible missions expecting you to clear them, and it's a real pain in the butt when things obviously go wrong. Ruby looked down. Look, you asked what it was like being like me, and for me, things suck, but that doesn't mean things will suck for you. Naruto cheered her up. We're going to Beacon. We'll get teams to work with in the future that will allow us to make those impossible missions possible. Ruby tilted her head. We? Naruto grinned. Yes, we. You're going to Beacon? Yup. But you're already a huntsman. Menma is the huntsman, not Naruto. Naruto unclipped the fox mask and put it on the table. I don't. Menma's just a codename, something me and Osmond came up with because there are things that only I can do, but I'm not an official huntsman, not yet. Naruto explained. Then Naruto's your real name? Ruby asked, remembering Osmond mentioning the Reaper's real name earlier. Yep, as Naruto I'm still just a civilian who's going to join Beacon Academy. Naruto confirmed. I trust you can keep that our little secret. He winked. Ruby smiled, blushing lightly. Yes. Ruby's scroll suddenly rang. The girl answered the call. I'm at the station, where you at? A young female voice came from the scroll, loud enough to be heard by Naruto. At a cafe near the station, the one with the pink neon sign. Ruby replied. I'll be there in a minute, don't go anywhere. Lilsis. The call was cut. Sorry, I have to leave. Ruby bowed. Thank you for the cakes. Naruto waved. That's okay, see you at Beacon. Ruby smiled. Yes. Remember, it's our little secret. Naruto winked again, and Ruby nodded. 2 days later Naruto was sitting on an empty bench inside one of the Beacon airships, dressed in faded blue jeans and a burnt orange polo shirt, both of his frontis features hidden by his aura and as custom for him, no shoes. The teen looked out the window while waiting for the ride to be over. Naruto had decided after careful consideration entering Beacon disguised as a human, mostly because he did not want to deal with the discrimination that frontis received on the daily. Supposedly Beacon did not discriminate against frontis, but that statement only applied to the academy staff and not the students. Naruto personally knew how some families had influenced their children to look down frontis, and while the population that mistreated frontis was dwindling by generations, there were still some hard-headed members of society hellbent on discriminating them. His thoughts were interrupted by 2 bickering girls near his bench. He glanced over and was surprised to see Ruby and a taller girl with messy long blonde hair, with lilac eyes dressed in a tan vest over a yellow crop top that accentuated her bust and black shorts held by brown utility belt, decorated by what resembled an asymmetrical pleated skirt over the back. Naruto had been about to wave at Ruby when another blonde, a male, suddenly rushed past him, and Naruto watched as the guy puked into the airship bin, scaring away the rest of the would-be students. The puking guy was dressed in a black hoodie, covering his forearms were reddish-orange sleeves, over his hoodie was a white chest plate and shoulder armor, blue jeans with 2 belts, one for his pants, and the other a utility belt that also was for the sword strapped to his side. If Naruto recalled correctly, that kid was John Arc, the grandson and son of the best huntsmen of their respective generations. He had seen the father of the boy in some of his missions, and if John was anything like his father, he was bound to become another strong warrior. His attention was disrupted by the airship hologram screen turning on. A pre-recorded flowery message by Glinda played where she welcomed the new batch of would-be students and announced they would be arriving shortly. Naruto gladly stood up from his seat, stretching his joints and moved closer to the hatch in order to be one of the first to leave the aircraft. He wasn't the only one with that idea because leaning against the wall next to the hatch was a girl of light olive complexion, long wavy black hair and a black bow that looked like cat ears. Her body was slim but stacked in the right places, which were further accentuated by her choice of dressing. Black-heeled boots, black stockings that faded to purple past her knees, a tight short zipper-lined white short, a button vest open below her breast with coattails at the back. Under the vest was a sleeveless undershirt that exposed her midriff. Naruto easily recognized the girl, having seen her and crossed blades with her when the White Fang were involved in his mission. He walked closer to her and waved, which gained her attention. The girl tilted her head, not recognizing at first, but then ribbon wiggled lightly as her nose twitched and eyes suddenly widened. Blake started, but Naruto put a finger to his lips. He motioned to the would-be students around them, and Blake understood that he did not want to make a scene. Blake growled, stomping towards Naruto and grabbed him by the polo, her short stature compared to his height making the scene somewhat comical. "What are you doing here?" Blake hissed, her fight-or-flight instincts triggered since her cover might be blown if he was here. Naruto scratched his cheek, becoming a student. Blake hissed again, which made her look like a little kitten hissing in Naruto's mind. "I could ask the same about you, what are you doing here?" Naruto's eyes glinted, his posture suddenly becoming oppressive as he looked down at the White Fang member. Lake tried backing off, but Naruto chased after her, corraling her against the hatch as she hurriedly looked for an escape, but found none. In a last-ditch effort she was about to punch his chin when the airship suddenly lurched forward and had to grab Naruto's shirt again to try and steady herself. As Naruto's luck would have it, the hatch suddenly opened behind the distressed Blake, her unbalanced body started falling backwards, and she pulled on his shirt. Their lips met. Blake's eyes widened comically as Naruto tried pulling back, but the airship ramp was right below the girl's already unsteady feet, her ankles slipped, and she kept pulling Naruto, lest she fall on her rump and tumble down the ramp. The two continued awkwardly stomping, trying to regain balance all the way to the landing strip. When Naruto finally felt the steady floor of the landing strip, he grabbed Blake's hips and lifted the half-fallen girl to her feet. She withdrew with a red face equal parts in anger and embarrassment, her fingers were covering her mouth as she glared at Naruto. Naruto coughed into his hand. Well, that just happened. Slap. Chapter 3. Surprises and Secrets. Their lips met. Blake's eyes widened comically as Naruto tried pulling back, but the airship ramp was right below the girl's already unsteady feet, her ankles slipped, and she kept pulling Naruto, lest she fall on her rump and tumble down the ramp all the way to the concrete landing strip. When Naruto finally felt the steady floor of the landing strip, he grabbed Blake's hips and lifted the half-fallen girl to her feet. She withdrew with a red face equal parts in anger and embarrassment, her fingers were covering her mouth as she glared at Naruto. Naruto coughed into his hand. Well, that just happened. Slap. Naruto nursed his red cheek as he glanced around and noticed there were students of other earlier airship pointing at him and Blake, their whispering and barely concealed judgment visible from far away. Naruto sighed, looking at the still glaring Blake who was quietly fuming. That's the first time you've landed a hit on me. Blake glared harder. If that was possible, serves you right for forcing yourself on me. Naruto glanced back at the ramp. The students of the airship they had arrived were starting to descend, and he did not want to deal with the drama that would be caused by their scene. Blake, I'm going to give you two options. One, you sit down with me and we can talk, or two, we make a scene, blood is spilled, and I take you to the police. Now choose. Blake trembled equals part anger and fear. She knew he would live up to his words, and even if she fought to the best of her abilities, compared to him, she would lose 10 out of 10 times. Naruto rubbed his cheek, sighing once more before moving towards the academy building. After a moment of hesitation, Blake followed him. The two walked in silence for a couple of minutes before Naruto suddenly sat by one of the benches not too far away from the main building of Beacon. Blake hesitated again, and only after Naruto rolled his eyes and crossed his arms, she sat beside him. Okay, let's pretend that nothing happened at the airship and talk. Naruto scratched his cheek and after a second of thought added, in case you're wondering, no, I'm not jazzing after you or anything, I'm legit here to become a student. Blake digested his words but kept her guard up in case he was lying. I want to change. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Blake sighed, looking down. I defected the White Fang. The fake White Fang, you mean? Why? Blake glared. It's not fake. She hissed again and Naruto raised his arms peacefully. Sure, still, why? Naruto asked once more. I couldn't take it anymore, the things we were doing, they wouldn't bring us peace. Blake looked down again, her ribbon dropping somewhat. I couldn't stomach the new ideals the White Fang was forcing on us. Naruto clapped twice. Would you look at that, you finally started thinking by yourself. Blake glared at the insult but couldn't retort back since his words were true. All the time she had been in the White Fang, she was being herded like a sheep by the new superiors of the group. It wasn't until her hands started to be stained indirectly by blood and her fights with him that she started questioning if what the White Fang was doing was right. Naruto's eyes softened. For what it's worth, I'm glad you had a change of heart. I'm sure Beacon will be a nice first step to whatever you think will be best for you from now on. Right? Blake took his words to heart and taking advantage of his somewhat laid-back attitude, she asked, why are you here? Naruto laughed. Like I said, I'll become a student here. I wasn't an official huntsman, so now that I'm of age I'll become one properly. You weren't? Yep, wasn't. Just like you, cover missions and all that, so let's make a deal. I keep your secret and you keep mine. Naruto pointed at his missing frontis features. Blake blinked twice, only now that he was pointing at them, she realized the frontis features were not there. How? Naruto childishly grinned. Part of the deal, so are you taking it or not? Blake frowned. If she accepted then she would have an easier time at the academy, but if she didn't then there was no certainty that he wouldn't blabber about her former occupation and get her arrested. She didn't consider he would go back on his words because he was always true to his words. Whenever the White Fang was intercepted by him, he would give the group 3 options before any fight ensued. 1. Run away and he would not chase. 2. Fight and risk dying. 3. Surrender and be captured until his mission was over. Of course, the White Fang group always chose the second, but only after several attempts where they got their ass handed back to them and various of the high-ranking members dying under his side that the White Fang started choosing the first and third option. And he was always true to his words, never once chasing after them or mistreating those who surrendered to him and being released after his missions were over. Many times, they tried to coax him into joining the White Fang, but his response was always the same: your fake ragtag group of misfits. No thanks. So, Blake trusted him even if she didn't like him. I accept. Good. I'll hide them, but once every week we have to meet for me to reapply my aura on you, okay? Naruto pointed at a ribbon. Blake nodded. How do we do this? Give me your hand for a second. Blake hesitantly complied. The moment their hands met, she felt the influx of his aura rush inside her arm, traveling all the way to her chest, where she felt a tickling sensation over her skin before it was over. And done, remember, once a week. An explosion a couple meter away from the two occurred, interrupted Naruto. The two looked at the blast site and saw Ruby being yelled at by a girl with long white hair held in a side ponytail and dressed in a pale blue bolero jacket and a similarly colored thing-length dress with snowflake designs at the hem. A Schnee crest was emblazoned at the back of her jacket and Naruto facepalmed. How unlucky of Ruby to meet the current Schnee heiress. Naruto saw how apologetic and sad Ruby was looking and decided to save her from the Schnee's very well-known wrath. Unbelievable. The Schnee heiress shouted, this is exactly the kind of thing I was talking about. Hey, Naruto placed a hand on Ruby's shoulder and brought her closer to his side. That was an accident. I'm sure Ruby didn't mean to cause an explosion, right? Ruby looked up, recognizing Menma and silently thanking him for the help. I really didn't mean to. And who do you think you are to enter yourself into our discussion without permission? The Schnee heiress glared at him. Naruto Uzumaki, it's nice to finally meet you too. Princess Naruto smiled at the heiress, memories of an old promise resurfacing the more he looked at Weiss. Weiss crossed her arms. Finally some proper recognition. Who's she? Ruby whispered. Weiss Schnee, those Schnee, Naruto whispered back, and Ruby suddenly looked 10 times more apologetic. Say princess, did Ruby apologize? Naruto asked with a tilt of his head. Weiss huffed yes, but she still needs to understand how dangerous her actions were. Naruto nodded. I see, then as to not take more of your precious time I'll be the one to teach Ruby those dangers, that okay princess? Weiss glared but harumphed positively. As long as she learns her lesson, I'm done with this. The heiress turned without another word and left. Ruby collapsed onto Naruto, but he kept her steady. Sorry little Ruby, but you probably caught her at a bad time. Weiss is usually not that harsh. Naruto reassuringly rubbed the distraught girl's shoulder. When are they on a good mood? Blake sarcastically spoke. She had watched the scene play out from the bench and had no intention of joining until the Schnee left. You'd be surprised, Naruto snorted. Anyways, Ruby, this is Blake. Ruby waved from her spot beside Naruto. Hello. Blake waved back. She was curious about the two relationships but held her tongue. Why are you alone, Ruby? Weren't you with your sister earlier? Naruto asked once the red girl had managed to stand on her own feet. Ruby kicked the ground looking like a dejected puppy. She ditched me since her friends were waiting for her. Naruto and Blake traded looks. Even if the two didn't get along, they both had a soft spot for people who were left behind regardless of the circumstances. Let's go to the assembly together. Naruto offered Ruby his hand, which the girl gladly took with a million-watt smile. Excuse me. The three turned to look at the new person. I'm John and I was wondering if you could guide me to the assembly room, John awkwardly said with a troubled smile. Aren't you the guy who vomited in the airship? Ruby no tact asked, and John visibly deflated as he groaned. Naruto snorted again. Let's go. Once the group of 4 teens entered the assembly room, they found the place to be filled to the brim with students. Ruby clutched Naruto's arm tightly, afraid to be left behind again, while the 4 made their way through the crowd to find a decent spot where they could view the platform at the center better. On their way, Naruto caught sight of Glinda among the other teachers of Beacon Academy, but held back from waving at her and interrupting the headmistress' work. Somewhere along the way through the students, Blake had quietly slipped away, leaving only John, Naruto and Ruby clinging to Naruto's side. The 3 trudged forward until Ruby was called out by her sister. The girl gave a silent thanks to Naruto before leaving his side and joining her sister's group. You good? Naruto asked John. John nervously rubbed his neck. Yeah, thanks again, I would have been lost if it wasn't for you guys. Naruto grinned, bumping fist with John to bolster the awkward boy's courage. The lights dimmed and the platform was lit up. Glinda walked forward to deliver another flowery message to the would-be students, announcing that more than 2,000 students were hand-picked and would undergo an initiation test to cherry-pick the best students out of the batch. While Glinda gave her announcement, Naruto quietly slipped away from John's side and moved to the walls of the assembly room. He hid behind one of the many columns adorning the place and waited for his cue. During the 2 days that he had taken to rest before coming to Beacon, the headmaster had requested if Menma could make an appearance this year during the initiation speech to bolster the students' valor, since there were more applications this year than previous ones. Naruto had accepted, if there was anything he could do to encourage the future generation into becoming better, then he would do it. Ahem, I'll keep this brief, coughed into the mic, discreetly testing the sound and fixed his glasses when it was satisfactory. Welcome, you have traveled here today in search of knowledge, to hone your craft and acquire new skills, and when you have finished, you plan to dedicate your life to the protection of the people. Osmond conveyed his views of what a huntsman entailed to the silent crowd. Now that their attention was tickled, he continued. But I look among you and all I see is wasted energy in need of purpose. Direction. Osmond hit the teens right in their immaturity, rousing their emotions further. You assume knowledge will free you of this, but your time at this school will prove that knowledge can only carry you so far. Osmond taunted, knowing the crowd was engaged in his speech. To become a huntsman that will protect your future friends, family, lovers, you must take the first step into this perilous journey, and it will be up to you how to use the tools and knowledge given to you at this academy. Osmond smiled, tapping the cane on the platform which was Naruto's sign to make his appearance. Naruto used his semblance from behind the pillar, a murky pool of darkness beneath his feet swallowed his body. In the separate dimension created by his semblance, his body was coiled by dark tendrils that clung to his body and changed his appearance. First to appear were both of his frontis features, then his white fox mask and his innerwear. A straight linen long-sleeved black jacket halfway open which displayed the top of his inner orange mesh shirt, dark gray tight pants held by two utility belts with various pouches. The last thing to appear on his person was the gray cloak with loose belts that hid his clothes from view. There was a ripple in his dimension, indicating that a second had passed in the outside, and Naruto nodded to himself. He summoned his scythe with a poof of smoke and clipped the compacted weapon on his back above his swishing crimson fox tail. The dimension rippled again as Naruto hid his face under the fox mask and stepped through the metaphorical gate connecting his semblance to the outside world. Beside Osmond's cane a pool of light was formed, and slowly, a figure rose from the pool as murmurs started to travel through the surprised crowd. Osmond smiled and pointed an open hand at Menma. This year, we have a special guest that will give you your first lesson, and hopefully one that sticks with you through the years you spend in this academy. Welcome young warriors. Menma's voice was deep and firm, the slits of the mask displaying an unnatural gleam as he looked at the crowd of would-be students. I am glad to see so many warriors of my generation taking up arms in this fight. We are all battling against the grim. Menma displayed his right arm, fingers slightly curled with somewhat lengthened feral black painted nails. I want each and every one of you to look to the person beside you. The crowd obeyed somewhat reluctantly, and Naruto waited for a couple seconds before continuing. The future is never a certain thing, so know that the person you just looked at may be someone completely different in the future. They could be your best partner, your lover, your friend. Menma closed his fist. Nails digging into the skin as blood slowly dripped from his hand. They could become the criminal you will have to take down in the future, for not all of us have the same zeal or beliefs, and while I will never judge you for the decisions you make under the pressure exerted by your constant life struggles, there will be those who are affected by them. Menma hid his arm under the cloak again, tilting his head and using his vast ocean of energy to press down on the would-be student's aura and make them feel insignificant. My lesson to you, and yourself of the future, is that whatever decisions you take be done after considering every possible outcome. The pressure doubled, suffocating everyone including the teachers in the room. For your life is not only your own as it's also part of those around you, and whatever you choose can and will affect them. Menma raised the pressure and chuckled as his body sunk into the pool of light and disappeared, his disembodied last words reverbed across the room. So, choose wisely which kind of path you'll walk from this day forward. After Naruto's theatrical exit from the stage, Osmond had bowed to the crowd and walked away as Glinda had taken the stage and explained the details of the initiation test. She made the teachers guide the would-be students to the ballroom where they would stay the night to rest and prepare for the next day. Naruto looked around the enormous room that was filled with improvised beds by the other would-be students, which hung around in groups. He had taken a spot close to one corner of the room and had his back resting against the wall. He could see some of the would-be students still in deep thought of both his and Osmond's words and was glad that some had taken their speeches to heart. It showed maturity, and Naruto was certain that most of those thinking were the ones that would do fine during the initiation test. Nature called and Naruto had to answer his body needs. He stretched before heading to the men's bathroom. After washing his hands and splashing water on his face, he looked at the man in the mirror. 2 years had gone past since his impromptu arrival in Remnant and almost didn't recognize the person staring back at him. While his physical features were the same, except for being somewhat sharper and indicative of his body maturing, he knew deep down, the last year had changed him internally. Naruto had discovered many of Remnant's dark secrets, and Remnant had retaliated by sinking its chaotic fangs in the shinobi's life, forever marking and changing him. His musing was cut short by laughter behind him and someone screaming for help. Naruto glared when he saw John being pushed into one of the bathroom stalls by 2 taller boys that tried to push the kid's head into the bowl. Naruto's body reacted on instincts, throwing the soap bar at the back of one of the boys with such strength that knocked the teen out and released John's head. The other boy shouted in surprise and turned to Naruto, but it was too late. Naruto lifted the boy by shirt and literally swung him an arc above his head, smashing the boy on his back against the floor and knocking him out. He pocketed out his scroll and sent a message to Glinda with a picture of the two troublemakers, which was instantly replied with an "I'll take care of it." "Thank you, man. You saved me there." John breathed in relief, fixing his roughed-up bunny Onisi pajama. "You good?" Naruto asked, raising an eyebrow at John's choice of clothing. "Yeah, just gimme a second to catch my breath." John took a deep breath. "Why were they bullying you?" Naruto asked. John rubbed his neck awkwardly. "Old classmates too, was a pushover back then and well." Naruto sighed, rapping his knuckles lightly against John's chest. "Don't let your past demons haunt you, man, you gotta take a stand at some point." "I know, I'm trying. It's why I came to Beacon," John admitted, and Naruto could see hidden deep beneath the awkward kid's eye his flickering resolve. Naruto thought for a second before deciding to encourage the teen. "Well, you already took the first step by coming to Beacon, so just keep trying. I'm sure the old you is proud of the current you." John awkwardly laughed and nodded. The two blondes walked out of the bathroom. "You certainly don't lack confidence if you're wearing that," Naruto pointed out with a snicker that had John scowling. "Hey. My mother chose this for me, it's not that bad, right?" John looked at himself and cringed somewhat. "Right?" Naruto looked away and John deflated again. "Naruto, John." The two guys turned their heads to look at the person calling them. They spotted Ruby sitting with her sister, while she waved one hand enthusiastically. As the two guys approached them, they took in the girl's sleepwear. Ruby had a black tank top with a heart-shaped Beowulf design and long white pants with pink roses. Her sister had an orange tank top with a flame emblem and black boy shorts. "Hey Ruby," Naruto ruffled the girl's hair after the two guys sat next to them. "What are you up to?" "Writing a letter to the gang back at Signal. I promised to tell them all about Beacon and how things are going," Ruby mumbled while chewing her pencil. "Oh, that's so cute." Yang chirped teasingly before Ruby's pillow hit her on the face. "Shut up. I still haven't forgiven you for leaving me behind at the entrance," Ruby scolded her older sister. "I said I was sorry." Yang rolled her eyes and crossed her arms, which pushed up her sizable breasts. "Besides, it worked for the best, you made 3 friends know." Ruby's glare softened somewhat. "If almost blowing up the Schneeris can be considered a good thing, then yes, sure. If it wasn't for Naruto, I don't know what would have been of me." "Right, so which one of you is Naruto?" Yang asked, sizing up both blondes. John pointed at Naruto and Naruto pointed back. Ruby giggled. She hadn't told Yang about Naruto's whisker birthmarks, so unless she had somehow seen him before she wouldn't recognize him between the two blonde guys. "Haha, very funny." Yang scowled and cracked her knuckles. "Two Nujis and one laughing." Ruby later. "Nice to meet you, I'm Naruto Uzumaki." Naruto rubbed his throbbing head, offering a fist bump to the grinning spitfire that was Ruby's sister. John arched. John pouted from his spot, eyes watery from how painful Yang's noggin was. "You're very strong." Yang Xiaolong. Yang grinned at the compliment and bumped fist with Naruto. "Thanks for helping my sister earlier." "It's what friends are for." Naruto winked at Ruby, who giggled. "That reminds me, have you seen Blake?" "Nope, I've been hanging around Yang since the assembly." Ruby replied, finishing up her letter and putting it in her bag for later. "You are talking about black, brooding and cute over there?" Yang pointed to a wall where one Blake Belladonna was currently reading a book. The black, brooding and cute girl was dressed in a short black yukata that exposed her thighs and collarbone, and her trademark black ribbon that looked like cat ears. "Oh, yeah, that's her." John blushed lightly seeing the provocative attire. "Why don't we go say hello?" Yang grinned, standing up and marched towards the lonesome girl, while the 3 others sighed at Yang's exuberance before chasing after her. "Luothere," Yang sing-sang once she was within earshot of Blake. Blake looked up from her book for a second, taking in Yang's appearance. "Yes. I heard you helped my sister earlier and became her friend, so I thought, might as well make another friend myself. The name's Yang." Yang grinned impishly, putting one hand on her hip and extending the other for the quiet girl to shake. Blake didn't recall helping anyone until she saw Ruby, John and him arriving behind Yang. Her brain clicked and Blake slowly shook Yang's hand. "Oh, that, right. It was nothing." "Hey Blake, we aren't interrupting you, right?" Ruby worriedly asked, looking between the quiet girl and her book. Blake wanted to shut the interaction down, but the young girl had earned a soft spot in Blake's heart since her misfortunate accident during the evening. The quiet girl sighed, closing her book. "Not really." The 4 would-be students sat in a circle around Blake, properly introducing themselves and spoke about their reasons for coming to Beacon and Dreams. Obviously all 5 would-be students kept some secrets to themselves, but they still tried to make the newly made friendship work, and for the first time in Ruby's, John's and Blake's lives, they were among people that, without knowing each other's past, felt somewhat comfortable. Yang simply soaked the good vibes for all it was worth, since she was used to playing matchmaker with her own group of friends, but it was nice that Ruby was part of this newly made group of friends. Naruto had been quietly enjoying the group interactions until his uncanny luck reared its head and someone stomped behind him. What in the world is going on over here? Don't you realize some of us are trying to sleep? Naruto recognized that tone of voice, being at the receiving end of a similar but older one many times in the past. "Oh, not you," Ruby shouted, diving behind Yang and hiding herself from the frosty air's glare. "I said I was sorry." Yang gaze hardened, connecting the dots between her sister words and actions, before glaring back at Weiss and cracked her knuckles. "So you're the shni, huh?" Naruto was going to act before things escalated, but everyone stopped when his scroll started ringing. The shinobi fished the scroll from his pocket and his eyes narrowed at the name. "Sorry, I've got to take this call." Chapter 4. Memories, Meetings and Surprises. Naruto was going to act before things escalated, but everyone stopped when his scroll started ringing. The shinobi fished the scroll from his pocket and his eyes narrowed at the name. "Sorry, I've got to take this call." Naruto had been quick to exit the ballroom. After answering his scroll, he had hurriedly rushed to the headmaster's office at his behest and arrived at the same time as Glinda did. Now, the two blondes were facing the headmaster who sat with his head held in his hands. "What do you mean there's a malice nest in Emerald Forest?" Naruto smashed his hands against the headmaster's table. "I sent the teachers to prepare the relics for the initiation test, and Professor Peach informed me of an anomaly near the ruins. I went to investigate after the assembly to confirm her words." Osborne sighed deeply, straightening his posture, but still scowling. "How is it possible for a malice nest to be formed in such a controlled environment?" Glinda chewed her thumb's fingernail. And controlled Emerald Forest was, since it was the hunting grounds for Beacon students and teacher alike. Every 2 weeks the certified academy members would scout the entirety of the forest to control the population of Grimm infesting the area and take out any of the aggressive species. "I have a theory." Osborne pressed a button on the digital desk. The 2,000 holographic papers of the students were displayed. "It's the first year Beacon Academy has received over 500 applicants in 1 year, and most likely the absurd quantity of emotions converging in one man-made Grimm nest set the carefully maintained balance off." It's possible Naruto's personal knowledge of Malice Nest allowed him to confirm Osborne's theory. Emerald Forest certainly fulfills various requirements for the creation of one. When was the forest last scouted? Exactly a week ago, but there were no traces of anything unusual, Glinda replied. So, it's still a maturing nest. Good, Naruto nodded to himself. Osborne, we should hold the initiation off until the Malice Nest is taken care of, Glinda supplied. We can't. Osborne shook his head. Halting the initiation will only cause confusion among the students and fuel the negative emotion to the nest and accelerate its development. As it is now it seems to be a week old, but if we wait any further. Naruto grumbled. Even if we stop the initiation, it would take 10 B+ rank huntsmen to clear a week-old Malice Nest, and knowing how slow Vale response is, we'd be stuck for another week before receiving support, and by then it'll be too late. The three went silent after that, thoughts on how to take the situation bouncing in their heads, but no easy solution came to mind. If the nest is anything below a week old, there's a chance the test can be completed without waking up the Malice cores. Naruto metaphorically threw the thought onto the table. But what if it wakes up? What would we be dealing with? Glinda asked, concerned for the student safety. It depends on a lot of things. What did you find during your investigation, Osborne? Naruto asked, crossing his arms. The forest floor has caved somewhat, the trees lost some of their color, the giant species we keep are also avoiding the area west of the abandoned temple. Osborne recalled off the top of his head what signs matched the descriptions of nests from previous reports. So, most likely an earth-type core. Then Naruto frowned. That's good, those take the longest to mature, since they need to absorb equal amounts of life force from nature and negative emotions. What if we add a new rule and forbid the students from approaching the west side of the forest? Glinda added another option to the deck. Osborne hummed, almost accepting the idea, but before taking a decision he needed more inputs as an expert on the matter. What do you suggest, Naruto? Naruto thought hard, his personal knowledge flooding his brain as he quickly calculated all possibilities. An Earth-type Malice Nest took 2 months to fully mature on its own, 1 month if it was fed negative emotions at a constant rate. There were 2,000 students, and at least half of them were going to be feeding negative emotions during the night and the test to the nest. If the abandoned temple Osborne had chosen to place the relics was far away enough from where the Earth core was located, then there was a big chance that the initiation test wouldn't trigger an early awakening of the core. Unless someone fucked things up. 2,000 students would be roaming the forest, and Naruto wasn't privy to the details of the test yet, so no telling how high the stakes would be and what kind of pressure the 2,000 would-be students were put under. What kind of test are we taking? Naruto needed to know. 24 hours relic retrieval, no interferences, Osborne replied. Seek, obtain, wait. Naruto could work with that. As long as nobody royally fucks up in the west side of the forest, then we can deal with the nest after the initiation is over, so just make it clear that after obtaining the relics the students have to stay over the east side and we'll be good. Naruto summarized his thoughts. And if things go wrong? Glinda needed to know the risks and prepare for the worst case scenario. Ozpin may be an optimist and believe in the best of everyone, but Glinda Goodwitch was a realist and she wouldn't allow beliefs to be the safety net of her future students. I'll take care of it, Naruto cracked his knuckles. If it was a fully grown nest, I wouldn't risk it, but since it's one so young, I should be enough to take care of it. Glinda sent a scathing glare at Naruto. You're playing the hero. Naruto looked away, knowing perfectly well how Glinda hated his hero tendencies. Unless you're willing to leave the students unsupervised while the test is going on and help me with the nest, then it's our best option. Glinda, there's a chance that things won't escalate that far. Ozpin tried calming the seething headmistress. Let's trust Naruto on this one, okay? Naruto gratefully nodded at the headmaster. I don't like this. Glinda crossed her arms sighing, and I know I won't be able to stop either of you. Ozpin and Naruto traded glances. Just let me know what to do tomorrow, good night. Glinda literally walked off, leaving the two males to their own. Well, that could have gone better. Naruto awkwardly rubbed the back of his head. Anything else I may need to know? No, that was all, please rest and prepare for tomorrow. Ozpin leaned back onto his chair, grabbing his mug and taking a long sip. Knowing that he was being dismissed, Naruto left the office. So, this is what you meant, huh? Naruto thought as he walked back towards the ballroom. What are you hiding, Ozpin? By the time he was back in the ballroom, it was past midnight, the lights were out, and most students were already sleeping. Naruto's night vision helped him navigate through the haphazardly sleeping students and collect his bag from the corner he had chosen. He moved towards his new group of friends and found all of them asleep, except for the ex-White Fang member. He quietly nodded at the cat Franus that was reading a book as he prepared his own bed, 2 layers of towels stacked on top of one another and his own bag as the pillow, before sitting next to the woman reading. Did I miss anything? Naruto quietly asked. The Shnee left as soon as you did, Blake replied without taking her eyes off the book. Must have been an important call, she commented airily. You could say that, Naruto bemusedly replied and changed the topic. What are you reading? The book about a man with 2 souls that fight for control over one body. Blake didn't mind the topic change, there were some things that couldn't be said after all. Huh, interesting, mind switching. Naruto browsed through his bag and pulled out one of his favorite books. He wasn't an avid reader, but he couldn't deny that Remnant had way more interesting stories than those found in the Elemental Nations. Blake tilted her head. Sure, I've already finished this one. They traded books and shared no more words as the two spent the rest of the night quietly reading their new book. 2 months had passed since Naruto started his lonely journey across Remnant at the behest of Ozpin. The older man had given him only grim extermination missions for the first month before he was ordered to start moving around the continents and fighting the new threats that had recently started spawning across the world. Grim Nest. Normally one would call any place where Grim lived in abundance a nest, however these were different, and so Naruto had labeled them differently since clearing his first 3 nests. Malice Nest. The place where negative emotion solidified into a crystal core that continued absorbing energy from its surroundings and transformed the environment to its new host needs. Any Grim in a perimeter around the core would offer its body to feed the core, and in turn the core would create an egg's nest from which stronger Grim would spawn after absorbing enough energy and nurturing them to their strongest possible form. Just like dust, the cores also had types. Naruto had cleared 3 different ones so far: fire, water and earth core type ones. Just as their name suggested, each type of core gave the Grim it spawned abilities related to the core. If that wasn't enough, the amount of Grim spawned from the nest also varied by how long a nest had been in incubation. From as little as 100 Grim up to 3,000 could be spawned, or at least that's the metrics Naruto used from personal experience. His latest mission had brought him to a desert south of Mistral, where huntsmen had reported unusual changes in the weather. The normal harsh sandstorms had become worse, since lighting had started to occur during the sandstorms without rain clouds in the vicinity. And as Naruto's luck would have it, after traveling for more than 2 days on foot under the unforgiving sun and weather looking for the reported area, a sandstorm had brewed on the horizon. Drinking the very last drops of water of his now empty water flask, Naruto made up his mind. He would run and seek shelter until the sandstorm had passed before continuing his mission. However, before he could enact his hastily made plan, the sandstorm was already upon him. Microscopic grains of sand pelted his tired and weakened body. He tried his best to hide his face from the dust, but a thunder suddenly struck right beside him, sending the shinobi tumbling down a dune as he continued being peppered by the sand. The sandstorm picked up strength, more thunder reverberating across the dunes as rocks were displaced and sent flying by the storm, many of them hitting the body of the shinobi that was curled up doing his best to protect himself from the hits. Seconds turned into minutes that turned into hours without the raging sandstorm stopping, the wounds caused by the debris hitting his body being healed by his semblance and only depleting more and more of the shinobi's aura as the time passed. Tired, thirsty and hungry Naruto couldn't hold onto his consciousness and fell with nobody to save him. "I'm sorry Glinda," were his last conscious thoughts. Naruto immediately woke up but not in the outside world, he was awake within his mind. He would always appear in this place when his body was exhausted and he lost consciousness. The enormous sewer with a giant door made of iron bars with a seal silently greeted him. Hope burned in the shinobi's heart at having another opportunity to try and reach his lost friend. "Kurama." Naruto waited. And waited. But no reply came, tears pooled in the shinobi's eyes as he walked through the cage that once housed his fuzzy friend, where the only thing that greeted him was a floating crimson orb. His fist hit the orb and it replied in kind by sending him flying back, hitting the cage, knocking the air out of his lungs and collapsing to the floor where he stayed down, looking at the glimmering sphere. Why, Naruto sobbed to himself, cursing the gods for taking everything he once loved away from him. His hard-fought accomplishments, his trusted friends, his future. If only he had been stronger. Naruto tiredly closed his eyes, viewing the mental image of the blonde woman who had taken him in and tried to make his new life something he wouldn't resent. The woman caressed his cheeks and her hair turned white. The shinobi blinked and felt extreme pain racking his entire body, the hands grabbed both of his cheeks and he heard mumbling before his body turned cold and numbed the pain. He blinked once more and focused past the new sensation at the person holding him, white hair tied in a bun with a long bang covering her right side of the face, slate blue eyes looking at him in concern. While Naruto throat burned from the lack of water and sand entrapped in the muscle, he coughed trying to dislodge the sand while the woman moved back before returning with an ice cup of water that was pressed to his lips from which he greedily drank the cooled liquid and parched his raspy throat. "Thanks," the shinobi mumbled, sitting up and taking stock of his body. The ragged cloak he had used to cover himself from the sun was nowhere to be seen and left him in his mesh undershirt, black jacket and tight gray pants. His compact weapon sat beside him, along with Menma's trademark fox mask. The mask was lifted by the woman's dainty fingers. "I didn't expect Menma the Reaper to be someone so young." Her voice was low, cool, yet still resounded in wherever they were. Naruto grunted. It wasn't the first time he was told something along those lines. He tried standing, but the woman easily held him down by placing her hand on his shoulder. "Don't move yet, I've only numbed your body, but you're still wounded." The shinobi took a deep breath and nodded. He closed his eyes and checked his energy reserves. His physical energy was sitting at 1/10 of the usual, the spiritual energy at 2/10. His aura was steadily recovering and was 5/10 of being full. As for his last source of energy, the malicious energy within him was full. Without hesitation Naruto controlled the foul energy and fueled his semblance with the potent force behind it. The passive regeneration of his semblance was jump-started by the rush of energy and worked on restoring his body to top conditions. What felt like seconds but were several minutes passed before the shinobi's body was healed and only the stiffness from not moving for so long remained. He turned to the white-haired woman who was staring daggers at him while eating a ration bar. "Where are we?" the shinobi asked, looking around curiously before catching the ration bar that the woman had half-eaten. "When my general told me that someone capable would be my companion for this mission, I wasn't quite sure what he meant." The woman started, standing up and dusting her pants. She was tall with a regal posture that seemed natural on her, dressed in a white long-sleeved coat buttoned at the collar, parted open at her chest and clasped again at her waist before opening to the sides and fell to her ankles. Beneath the coat was a pleated sleeveless blouse and a dark blue waistcoat. Her white trousers were tied on her long legs which the black garters she wore as accessories dug into her thighs and went down to her gray thigh boots. "Imagine my surprise when I get a message telling me my partner was on his way to this nest thing by traveling through the desert." The woman spoke again, fishing her scroll from her inner coat pocket before displaying the shinobi a faraway picture of himself. Naruto frowned, not taking kindly to being ignored by the woman, but withheld from speaking on it since she was the one to take care of him instead. He looked around while the woman continued. They were in a tunnel underground if the ruin-like walls at either side of him were any indication. When this supposed partner was nowhere to be found at the rendezvous point, I was about to start the mission on my own when I noticed the sandstorm. Then I reread the message and guessed that you must have gotten stuck by the sandstorm. The shinobi gathered his compacted weapon and stood up, stretching his limbs while the woman continued her rant. So, being the merciful woman I am, I went inside the sandstorm and by using my semblance to keep myself safe, I walked around for a bit and found you curled up and unconscious, but when I tried to move you, I couldn't. The woman's eyes narrowed slightly, no matter what I tried, I couldn't move you an inch, so I created an ice dome to protect us until the sandstorm abated. Okay, that explains how you found me and thanks for the help, but how did we end up here? Naruto pointed at the underground tunnel. That was the first time he met the Shini's equally uncanny type of luck as his. That happened after I created the dome, the sand beneath us gave away, and we fell through a series of tunnels that I covered, or we would have both died buried beneath tons of sand. The woman brushed the only strand of hair on her left side. Naruto nodded, satisfied that she didn't take so long to respond this time. Best introductions are in order then, I'm Menma. Naruto offered his hand. And I am Winter Shini. She clasped his hand. After their introductions were over, the two started aimlessly walking the underground tunnel for the better part of an hour. While they walked, they discussed their skill sets and how best to employ them if they were to work together to clean the malice nest. The shinobi learned of the Shini's incredible semblance, the Shini glyphs, a hereditary semblance that gave her the ability to create glyphs of aura with different effects that also varied with the dust she infused the glyphs with, giving her an extremely versatile ability set that augmented her high battle prowess to incredible extents. After hearing that her glyph affinity was ice, he jokingly stated that he was the Krieg to her blitz. They rounded a corner that turned the tunnel into a massive chamber where several eggs numbering in the high hundreds littered every spot on the floor, walls and even ceiling. The eggs were connected by thin dark tendrils from which lighting seemingly traveled through and made the eggs pulse. Naruto's eyes widened realizing they had literally stumbled upon the nest and he turned around to warn his partner only to find the woman curiously poking one egg with her boot. The egg cracked open, spilling a thick green substance before the incomplete head of a beowulf appeared from within the crack. The beast was missing an eye and its lower jaw. Naruto and Winter drew their weapons and pointed it at the struggling beast that stopped and looked upwards. The beast howled, the sound bouncing off the chamber walls, and its echo continued down the hall before everything went silent with the incomplete Grim seemingly dying. Everything was quiet for 10 seconds until the Shini did the one thing you must never do, tempt fate. Yes, we worried for nothing. Then the rumbling started, from deep within the chamber all the way to their position near the entrance. The ground shook precariously. "Get ready," Naruto harshly said, taking a low stance with the scythe behind his back. There was another loud pulse which made every egg left in the chamber suddenly crack open. The green liquid from within flooded the floor, while countless bestial shrieks sounded as the monsters were liberated from their nurturing prisons. Hundreds upon hundreds of Grim had suddenly spawned inside the underground ruin, and only the two huntsmen were there to fight against them. As far as the eye could see there were countless beowulfs, Borbidisks, Tagetis, Deathstalkers and their smaller variant Eastingers, nevermores the size of cars, filled the crowded roof of the chamber. And if that wasn't enough, the Grim, which was the reason the nest were named that way, appeared at the very far end of the chamber. It stood at an impressive 40-meter tall height on its hind legs, a torso about 10 meters wide, whose scales glowed white at the very center. Its arms were connected to its wings, making it look like bat's wings. The wyvern-type dragon. The dragon opened its giant maw and roared, its spawns obeying their mother's will, and moved to attack the two huntsmen. Naruto and Winter traded a quick nod before separating on opposite sides of the chamber. Naruto went left, killing the very first wave of Grim in his path with one swing of his giant scythe, while Winter went right, enhancing her body and speed with glyphs, which allowed her to stab the weak spots of the Grim on her side. The shinobi focused on clearing his side of the chamber. 3 beowulfs charged at him, but their heads were swiftly separated from their bodies before being kicked towards the nevermores that had tried catching the ninja in surprise. He spun around, dragging the scythe across another Ursai's torso and embedded it within the Tajitu that had tried to eat him whole. More Grim rushed at his back, but their bodies were pierced by a multitude of chains, spawning from the shinobi's foxtail. The chains extended far, piercing over 50 Grim that had been on his back and covered his blind spot. The scythe twirled again, slicing apart the dead Tajitu and giving him a clear view of the oncoming wave and his mission partner. The Shini had created a dome of glyphs on her side of the chamber, from which icy projectiles rained upon the Grim that entered its range, while she swiftly stabbed anything that managed to not die against the deadly hail. Her movements were precise, and no second was wasted after securing kill after kill. Naruto trusted she would be fine on her own and welcomed the next wave of Nestlings Grim, dubbing them that way for 2 reasons. 1. While their numbers were high, their strength was nowhere near that of a fully incubated Grim and instead was just one step below those of regular Grim. And 2. None of the nestling Grim had used the abilities the core usually granted them at the later stages of incubation. The shinobi swung his scythe in a wide arc again, bisecting the Grim and marched forwards, keeping his back protected by summoning more chains. Once he was closer to the center of the chamber, he chanced to glance at the dragon that had yet to make its move, and the shinobi panicked when his eyes caught sight of the beast. The dragon's maw was open, and its chest was crackling with electricity as it had been charging an attack while the two huntsmen were dealing with its nestlings. "It's charging something," Naruto shouted to his partner, receiving and equally panicked what? Back, the shinobi glanced his partner and saw her literally do a 360 front flip over the grim while shooting ice projectiles. Cool. Winter made a perfect landing next to him, her body jiggling under gravity's effect, and she noticed the same thing he did. "If he fires that we will be crushed by the sand above this place," Winter analyzed, knowing that between the two of them, they would be able to erect a defense strong enough to protect them from the attack, but not from its subsequent effect on the area around them. "Then I'll stop its charge, let's stay close to it and kill it first before dealing with the nestlings," Naruto spoke quickly, coating the blade of his scythe with his aura, giving it a flickering green-crimson tint. Winter nodded before raising her hand and creating a path of glyphs towards the dragon. "They will boost your speed and serve as footholds." Naruto nodded, piercing with his chains an ursai that had tried to sneak behind the frosty woman before jumping towards the first glyph, followed shortly by her. Winter weaved her saber, creating more icy projectiles that pierced the pesky Nevermores, obstructing their path while they continued leaping from glyph to glyph. The shinobi silently placed his trust in the woman and reinforced his own body with aura before leaping again, his speed increasing hundredfold between the boost of his aura and the glyphs, making him look like a ray of lighting that smashed scythe first into the crackling chest of the dragon. Now that Naruto was up close, he noted the grim dragon scales were pinkish, indicating that it was an extremely young one. The beast roared in pain as Naruto pushed the blade of his scythe deeper into the dragon's chest and stopped its charge attack. Naruto barely had time to block the wings. Hands of the dragon and being sent flying back. "This will take a while," Naruto muttered annoyingly as he fell. His descent was stopped by a glyph appearing beneath him. He righted himself and landed on his feet, swinging his scythe to cull the annoying Nevermores that had gotten too close. The white-haired woman appeared beside him a second after, her eyes fixed on the pesky avian grim before the crackling of electricity started again. The two watched as the dragon had once more opened its maw and was charging another breath attack, which, judging by how long the last one had taken and still failed to release, the shinobi knew they had a moment's respite. "We're lucky she's a young one," Naruto spoke after slicing another Nevermore apart. Winter raised an eyebrow. "She young?" Naruto nodded. "We named them nests because dragons are the first grim the core spawns to protect the eggs against intruders. They almost always spawn in pairs unless the core doesn't have enough energy. A female to protect the nest and a male to protect the core itself." Winter eyes widened in surprise. Grim dragons were supposed to be extremely rare and could only be found in extremely secluded places around the world, but the Reaper had just revealed these nests created such strong grim and in pairs. If she was any bit older, the dragon's ability to spawn grim from its scales would be available to her and we'd be in deeper trouble. They may be weaker than regular grim, but with those nestlings ones, they would be a major pain in the ass. Naruto cracked his neck and prepared for round 2. "Do you have any massive area of effect attack?" the shinobi asked. Winter withheld the need to ask more information from the whiskered teen, since it seemed their moment's respite was over. "I have a few, but they take a long time to charge." Naruto nodded, gathering the malicious energy within him. "Good, I'll keep the grim's attention while you charge the strongest spell you can pull off and end this." Winter was once more surprised when the shinobi's body was suddenly covered in a foul, dark crimson-like aura from head to toe, and when his eyes turned to her, she noticed they had turned emerald with crimson slits for her eyes. She regained her wits quickly and gave him a sharp nod. Naruto jumped down, gathering more of the malicious energy within him and steadily releasing it outside his body, which made the grim act like starved piranhas that had been thrown the juiciest piece of meat of their entire lives and ignored the woman left alone at the ceiling. "Hum at me, you mindless beast," Naruto growled, and for the first time he drew the katana Glinda had gifted him with his left hand. Chains sprouted from his shoulders, covering his forearms and circling around both of his weapons. "Get me," the shinobi shouted and spun once right before he fell onto the awaiting hungry grim beneath him. The weapons were thrown and swung by the chains holding them, slicing apart every grim that had been awaiting him before the shinobi landed, creating a crater with his newfound strength. The nestlings disregarded the obvious dangerous foe and attacked, their numbers disappearing just as quickly as they joined the fight with the shinobi's slowly but surely extending whirlwind of death until the crackling grew even louder, signaling the wyvern's almost completed breath attack. Naruto created more chains from his back that created a protective cage around him before he threw the katana towards the left hindwing of the wyvern and the side towards the right hindwing, both weapons easily piercing the grim scales and lodging themselves in its body. And the shinobi pulled. The frosty woman continued surprise. She had a perfect aerial view while she charged her glyph of the Whiskered Reaper, literally pulling the giant Grimm's body down to the floor, which created an enormous crater when the monster's body smashed against the ruin's floor and its nestlings. Winter was beyond impressed by the Reaper's prowess as the boy continued to manhandle the wyvern and protect himself from the ravenous Grimm trying, and failing, to devour him. Her aura suddenly dropped to the critical levels as the glyph she had been charging expanded in size, covering the entirety of the chamber's ceiling. She had no strength to warn her partner of the attack. Winter whispered the name of her strongest spell and trusted in Menma's abilities to get himself to safety before he was hit by the spell. Tacitus. The spell made no sound, but it was easily visible for falling like a waterfall from within the glyph's bounds. A light shone as the spell rained its divine retribution, freezing everything in its path. The Nevermores were the first to be frozen yet never falling as the giant block of ice continued its path. The back of the giant dragon was the next to follow, freezing the beast in place, and next were its nestlings at the ground. Everything was entombed by the spell, creating an enormous block of ice. 3 seconds after the glyph dissipated, the giant block of ice shattered into microscopic pieces, and everything entombed within ceased to exist. A pool of darkness formed on the now empty floor of the chamber from which the shinobi bubbled outwards, catching his breath. The moment the light had shone down upon him, he knew he had to get away from the deadly attack. The frosty woman faltered, which caused the glyph sustaining her airborne to dissipate and left her falling in a panic, but her fears were unfounded since the shinobi caught her in his arms. "You, okay?" Naruto asked after sensing the frosty woman's aura reserves were in the critical. There was a second's pause before the shini's face flushed slightly yes. As his own kind of uncanny luck would have it, the shini had to open her mouth again. Well, that was easy. Naruto was sorely tempted to let the shini fall on her ass if it wasn't for the rumblings starting anew, the floor, walls and ceiling of the chamber crumbling under the strong tremors and dislodging chunks of stone that threatened to crush the two. "Next time don't say anything," Naruto pleaded with an exhausted look while dodging the falling debris and carrying the giggling shini. The shinobi's own energy reserves were below 1/4 of the total, and if it wasn't for the ocean of malicious energy within him, the two would most likely have perished under the sand and rocks falling onto them. As it was, the shinobi used the malicious energy to create a cocoon of chains that protected them from being crushed underneath the pile of sand and slowly pulled them towards the surface. Once the cocoon had successfully left the sand prison, the two found the starry night sky of the desert with the cold wind blowing eerily. Naruto's senses were tingling, his arms tightening around the woman in his arms as the ground in front of them suddenly bulged upwards and the shinobi leaped back in preparation for what was to come. The bulging sand burst, sending grains everywhere as the second massive grim body flew upwards, creating an enormous hole, and revealed its massive frame. Another wyvern almost 3 times bigger than the one they had fought inside and much more developed. Its scales were brown with some tinted black, its wings a darker shade of brown. 2 sets of reptilian eyes fixed on the huntsman, and the Grimm's maw opened. The beast roared, and within its mouth Naruto saw the nest core crackling with electricity. Then, the desert was illuminated by the lighting breath released by the wyvern. Naruto woke up in a panic, his body instincts betraying him, thinking he was back there in the desert. It took his brain a couple of seconds before he realized he was inside Beacon, and that night had long since passed. The shinobi took a deep breath, releasing the tension that had gathered in his body. He made to sit up, but a weight on his chest prevented him from doing so. Curious, the whiskered teen glanced down his chest. Half curled on his chest was one black-haired Frontis quietly purring, the ribbon normally hiding her cat ears nowhere to be seen, and her yukata had fallen further down her shoulders, exposing an ample view of her breast. Naruto blinked twice, he admired the view for a couple of seconds before looking around and noticed that the ballroom was still covered by the darkness of the early dawn, with barely 10 students up and about from the 2,000 applicants. The whiskered teen decided that he could enjoy the warmth provided by the girl on his chest for a couple of minutes more, while recalling last night, he knew the two stayed up somewhat late reading their traded books, and the black-haired girl was the first to fall asleep with her head falling on his shoulder. At that point he had taken the book from her hands and gently woke her up so she could sleep properly in her own makeshift bed. Naruto distinctly recalled the ex-White Fang member doing as he had told without too much of a fuss before he went towards his own bed, which was far from her own. So how did she end up on top of him? The fondest girl mumbled something along the lines of warm before curling even more on his chest if that was possible. Naruto snorted, realizing that her fondest instincts must have acted up while she was asleep and searched for the warmest place in the nearby area, and he knew from various sources that sleeping next to him felt like sleeping under a katatsu. Still, as much as the shinobi enjoyed the feeling of Blake's body pressing down on him, the two had enough drama from their previous accident at the landing strip and didn't need more attention for their precarious positions. Naruto poked Blake's cheek softly, but the girl simply swatted the digit away. He poked her cheek again, but this time she tried to bite it in annoyance. The third time was the charm as her face crunched up in annoyance and her eyes blearily opened. Mornin, Naruto whispered, withholding his mirth as Blake blinked several times trying to get her brain working. Slept well. Not that I mind the show, but Naruto sat up, his face ending inches away from the still half asleep Blake, who merely yawned and tilted her head from side to side trying to stretch her neck. Naruto's face heated up slightly at the up-close tantalizing spectacle. His own instincts almost betrayed him when he caught a whiff of the furnace's natural scent. The shinobi masterfully reined in his instincts and pulled the dazed Blake's yukata back up her shoulders. What time is it? Blake slurred. It was very unlike her to have trouble waking up quickly, but for the first time in many years her sleep was peaceful and cozy, almost like the times she would cuddle with her mother when she was young. Naruto glanced at his scroll. 6:36. Blake hummed again, rubbing her eyes and looking around the ballroom. I really like the book. Do you have any others? Naruto asked once Blake finished her inspection of the room, to which the black-haired girl nodded and started crawling towards her makeshift bed. Once more Naruto was tempted by the way her hips and supple rear swayed. Blake returned the same way. Her yukata that had been hastily fixed by Naruto earlier was loose and threatened to spill its contents as she crawled back, a new book in hand, which was promptly set on his lap as the black-haired girl sat beside him once more. Now one may not think of Naruto as a person who likes reading, but that was not the case, because when he was young, he didn't have access to the library, and neither did they allow him to buy books from the bookstores in the elemental nations, so he never had a chance to develop the hobby. The few books he owned back then were ones found in trash cans and often were comics, and in the very rare case, smut books which he later learned were written by pervy sage. After entering the Shinobi Academy, he had been more focused on learning how to become a ninja that would become the Hokage than reading the boring stuff about the clans and whatnot. But here in Remnant the literature was different. There were no stories of ninjas, and instead the creativity of the writers was a breath of fresh air that had enraptured him. This is my favorite one. Blake suddenly cut off his train of thought. Thanks. Naruto read the title of the book, The Beauty and the Beast. Take care of it and return it to me when you're done, Blake ordered, her trust overriding her wariness of him. Naruto nodded, pocketing the book in his bag and gathering his things under the curious gaze of Blake. The black-haired girl instincts were trying to tell her something about the way he had acted that morning, but her sleep-addled brain prevented her from understanding what it was. Once Naruto was done gathering his things, he stood up and waved goodbye to the black-haired girl with a smile that made her heart ache, and she almost reached out to him but held back. Blake continued watching the blonde until he left the room while holding herself back from asking questions. Why do you have the same kind of fake smile I do? Blake silently thought to herself. A couple of hours later the would-be students were guided towards the Beacon Academy changing rooms so they could prepare their equipment for the initiation test. It was in one such changing room that we find the shinobi in deep thought as he finished putting on his black jacket. He was dressed in his regular outfit consisting of the black-orange mesh undershirt, a black long-sleeved jacket opened at the front and tight gray pants with the hems wrapped with tape. No shoes as per the usual. Naruto silently walked past the other male students changing and went towards the weapons hangar. There he found most of his new friends picking up their weapons from their lockers. He looked up his locker by the code given to them the previous day and found the one coded U1108 quickly. A swipe of his scroll across the locker panel made the door open and reveal his supposed student weapon. The katana Glinda had gifted him. The visage of the gift made him remember his surrogate sister previous night annoyance at his heroic tendencies. The blonde frowned as he equipped his weapon, securing it behind his waist with his utility belt. He pushed the locker door closed and by mistake did it too hard. The clanging of the door made the girl beside him jump. Everything okay? A glimpse of her face and a red ponytail appeared from behind her own locker door next to his. Oh, yeah, sorry. Didn't mean to close it that hard, Naruto replied, rubbing the back of his head awkwardly. You sure? There's still a couple minutes left before the test. Do you want to talk? The red-haired girl hummed, closing her own locker door and giving him a blinding smile. She was tall, 1.83 meters, dressed in a brown over-bust corset with a vertical light brown strip down the center, a tight A-line black miniskirt, black gloves up to her forearms, and bronze greaves that went up to her mid-thigh. She had various bronze accessories like a tiara, a gorget, bracelets among other things. You know, I'll take you up on your offer after the test is over, Naruto offered his hand. Name's Naruto. Purah shook his hand. Dainty footsteps and someone patting the red-haired girl's shoulders interrupted the two from any further conversation. So Purah, have you given any thought to whose team would you like to be on? Weiss tilted her head adorably with a smile. I'm sure everyone must be eager to unite with such a strong, well-known individual, such as yourself. Weiss laid the compliments thick, trying to butter up the slightly stiff Purah. Naruto would have facepalmed if it wasn't for the princess' concerns being legit. From his brief scan of the red-haired teen aura, he knew that she was quite the powerhouse, and anyone who ended up in her team would have a wonderful time. I guess. Purah rubbed one arm awkwardly, I was actually planning on letting the chips fall where they may. Naruto almost snorted at the crestfallen look that Weiss displayed for half a second before the princess gathered her wits once more. I see, but wouldn't you like to team up with me? Weiss asked again and Naruto couldn't hold it anymore. He snorted, earning a glare from the princess. What are you doing here? Naruto ignored the sense of deja vu those words produced. Taking the exam just like you, princess. Weiss fed. Hey Naruto. I'm so glad I found you, man. John suddenly stumbled upon the three. Sup? Naruto gave John the nod. I was told by Ruby that we'll be making teams, so I was wondering if you'd like to partner up. John awkwardly scratched his hair. Sorry to disappoint you, John, but I don't think we get to choose our teams, Naruto replied, patting the now dejected Ark's shoulder. What do you mean? Weiss suddenly appeared beside him, her inquisitive gaze digging holes into his head. I'm sure you know of Emerald Forest being the standard testing place for Beacon Academy, right, princess? Naruto asked, receiving a nod from the princess. Do you think any student would be able to survive there on their own? Naruto asked again, receiving a negative nod this time. So, we'll be making teams in the forest in order to survive. Purah arrived at the same conclusion Weiss did, and John gave her a grateful nod since he didn't understand the implications. Naruto nodded. The headmaster may have other rules set in place, but at least that's what I think will happen. Weiss narrowed her eyes. And how do you know this? Naruto gave her a small smile and placed his hand atop her head, gently patting the surprised girl. Call it a hunch, princess. To the surprise of John and Purah, the white-haired princess didn't lash out at the shinobi's hand. All first-year students report to Beacon Cliff immediately. Again, all first-year students report to Beacon Cliff immediately. That's our cue. Naruto, under the memories of an old promise, grabbed the princess' hand and gently pulled her along without any resistance whatsoever. Unknown to everyone who watched them leave, Weiss had been feeling a sense of familiarity from the shinobi ever since their first meeting, but she had not paid any attention to him since she had been angry at the time. This time was different because he was the sole source of her attention, the way he looked at her with his eyes softening, as if he knew who she really was, how gentle he was holding her hand, almost as if afraid that she would shatter at the good-natured attention. It made her feel like Weiss Schnee and not Weiss Schnee. Why? Weiss mumbled, looking at the whiskered teen's face as they continued walking. Naruto decided to ignore the mumbling princess since he wasn't quite ready to answer any of her questions. Luckily for him, she didn't push it and kept to herself until they arrived at the Beacon Cliff, where the numerous students waited for further instructions. Welcome, students, you have been gathered here in order to undergo the initiation test, which will determine whether or not you're staying in my academy, Osborne announced via megaphone. Linda continued with her own. I'm sure many of you have heard rumors about the team assignments, so allow us put an end to your confusion. Osborne continued, you all will be assigned your teammate today during this very test. There was a wave of murmurs that quickly quieted down under Glinda's glare. The test will be the following. Osborne teased the students by still not revealing how their teammates would be assigned and instead continued with the test explanation. There is an abandoned temple at the northern side of Emerald Forest. We will launch you to the forest where you are to form a team of 2 and go into this temple and retrieve 1 relic from there. After that, you're to spend the night in the southern and eastern side of the forest to bond with your teammate, and only after the clock hits midday tomorrow can you return to this very same cliff that will have the staff members ready to receive you. Linda continued while Osborne regained his breath. There are rules you are to follow during this test. 1. Do not interfere with other teams. This is a first-come, first-served type of test. 2. There are only 400 relics, and it's 1 relic per team. There was a massive wave of panic. If there were only 400 relics, that meant 800 students out of the 2,000 would be accepted into Beacon. As to how your teammate will be determined, well, the first person you make eye contact with once you land in the forest will become your partner for the next 4 years. Osborne took the chance to push the would-be students further. What? Linda spoke amidst the surprised shouts. You will also be monitored 24/7, and if we see you breaking any of the rules or trying to cheat, you will be forcefully disqualified. But make no mistake, just because we are watching you, it does not mean we will intervene if you find yourself in a dire situation. Also, you will meet opposition along the way, which will be how we qualify your abilities and determine how many classes you can or will need to take for your first semester. Glinda finished, turning off her megaphone and preparing for their makeshift launching strategy. With all that said, I wish you the best. Osborne nodded to the panicking students. Naruto wondered if wearing a blindfold until he found the best possible partner counted as cheating, but discarded the thought. He could see various students trying to come up with quick strategies to fall nearby to maximize their chances, while others were blindly panicking. One such case was little Ruby, who pretty much was begging Yang to be her teammate to no avail. One teacher called for the students to stand in groups at the platforms near the cliff where Glinda waited. It was quite an impressive sight to see 2,000 people stand shoulder to shoulder on the metal plates. Naruto knew what was to follow, and in order to lessen the burden on Glinda, he discreetly created a chain from the sole of his foot that traveled underground and connected to Glinda's own foot. Glinda felt the connection being made and glanced at Naruto amidst the crowd in silent gratification as he boosted her aura with his own. Ready? Glinda's semblance triggered, and with Naruto's boost easily allowed her to overcharge the platform's mechanisms and blast the 2,000 students towards the air. Beacon Academy initiation test had officially started. Chapter 5. What is lost and gained. The force behind Glinda's semblance combined with Naruto's aura and the platform spring's mechanism was so strong that even though there were 2,000 students sent airborne, none of them were sent in the same direction. There was a cacophony of screams as the would-be students sailed through the air at high speeds. Some of the smarter students started using their semblances to work out their landing strategies, while others used their weapons to sail properly through the air. Others simply closed their eyes in a silent prayer and waited for the painful landing that would be absorbed by their aura. Naruto was one of the many calmly thinking his options through as the shinobi memorized the locations where many of his newfound friends landed. There were several options he could take, such as using his semblance to teleport towards the ground, which would take the entire fun out of the situation, or he could use the sniper integrated in his scythe to slow his descent and simply cushion his fall. As he continued cycling through his thoughts, the decision was taken for him as one of the giant species of Grimm had felt the malicious energy within the shinobi and dared leave its nest the moment it had felt the tasty morsel approaching. Thus, Naruto barely noticed the giant Nevermore that swallowed him whole. With his mind elsewhere, his body instincts took over and he stabbed the tongue of the giant bird with a chain and held himself from falling down its throat as the bird spluttered in the air. The giant Nevermore gurgled several times trying to swallow the morsel that continued to cling with ease inside its mouth. The bird screeched in anger that suddenly turned into a screech of pain. Naruto's mind had caught up to his situation. And he was not pleased. "You stupid shit," Naruto growled, stabbing both hands into the tongue and creating chains that connected with the Grimm's nerves. The bird screeched in pain as Naruto forcefully took control of its body and forced the bird to fly at its fastest speed towards one of the many mountains in Emerald Forest before smashing beak first into the hard rock. Like a caricature of old, the bird beak got stuck onto the mountain while it flailed its wings trying to liberate itself. Naruto merely exited the Nevermore by merely breaking through the side of the bird's beak, which he climbed onto, and stared down at the struggling giant Nevermore. "Did you really try to eat me?" Naruto growled, looking straight into the monster's eyes. "Caw. I taste good. Caw. I see. Caw. That explains why I'm always being eaten." Naruto roared, punching the giant Nevermore so hard that the monster's beak was liberated from the rock, but it fell as it had lost consciousness from the powerful blow. Naruto would have fallen too if not for his feet clinging perpendicularly to the mountain, exactly as he would have done with the tree-walking chakra exercise. The shinobi took a moment to look at the forest and try to guess his location. He saw very far away towards his left the abandoned temple ruins, which meant that he was standing at the west side of the forest and close to the nest. It also meant he was extremely far away from everyone he wanted to team up with. He wouldn't trust his own uncanny luck to not give him a shitty teammate that he would not be able to trust, thus the blonde decided to use his aura to scan the environment around him. The shinobi did not like what he found. More than 400 students had fallen on the western side of the forest and were currently engaged in fights with the regular forest Grimm. Their emotions were a mix of excitement and fear, which fed the core he sensed deep underground. The core that did not feel like a weak hold. Naruto bit his thumb and circled through his options again. Most of his friends were on the eastern side of the forest, except for Ruby's sister and the princess, who had landed near the center of the forest. Naruto thought which of his friends would be the better teammate. Ruby was young but extremely skilled, working with her would likely be beneficial to both in the long run, more for the younger girl than himself. Yang was strong and from what he learned of her nature the previous night, very brash. He liked that aspect of her. John was malleable, would be the best word. It would take time, but the kid could become one of the strongest huntsmen of this generation if he had a proper teacher, one that Naruto was not willing to be. Yet. Weiss, which was a can of worms waiting to be opened, he honestly liked the girl, but she'd be a handful to work with. Then there was Blake, who he had crossed blades with and knew a lot about her way of doing things. Out of everyone he could be paired with, she'd be the best one, if only she didn't dislike him. It was totally not because of what happened that morning. No sir. Naruto was thinking with his upper head, not lower head. Seriously? Okay, maybe not completely. Naruto nursed his throbbing forehead in annoyance. Whoever he ended up paired with, he would find a way to work with him, so he would leave that up to his fat. Wait, I could work with this actually. Naruto grinned far too mischievously as a new idea sprung to mind, one he wasted no time in acting on. 1 hour later we find the shinobi calmly sitting on a tree stump in the middle of a clearing, eating some berries he had found earlier. A couple of feet away from him was a water stream, and ahead of him was a makeshift campfire with fish cooking on sticks. From out of nowhere Naruto pulled out a carrot and threw it behind him, and nothing happened for a few seconds until a white rabbit suddenly dashed into the clearing, springing past the grinning shinobi and taking the carrots into its paws. Naruto turned around slowly, facing the rabbit that continued its meal before he lunged at the tiny animal. The rabbit ears twitched and it jumped away at the last second, slapping Naruto's face with its feet as it sprung away. Naruto chased after the animal, corralling the rabbit with a water stream that the animal dared not jump into as Naruto loomed above it. The shinobi lunged again, but the rabbit was quicker, dashing past his feet with the carrot still dangling from its mouth. Just as the rabbit thought it had escaped, the human who had been feeding it carrots for the past hour made a cage of chains appear in front of the animal and startled it, stopping it in its tracks. Naruto once more loomed above the rabbit, which finally had no way out. The blonde grabbed the animal by the scruff of its neck and stared deeply into the rabbit eyes. Squeak. That's your fault for returning every time I threw a carrot. Squeak. Not a chance, besides I'm not going to cook you. Squeak. Naruto grinned far too devilishly, a chain sprouted from his forehead and connected with the rabbit's head. For 10 minutes the hybrid and animal stayed linked as Naruto used his semblance on the white rabbit, and the connection would have continued had it not been for a fireball exploding far above the emerald forest, visible to all students. Naruto glanced concernedly at the explosion, placing the rabbit on his hair and jumped. His body sailed so far upwards that he had a perfect aerial view of the entire forest around him. The forest. That was. On fire. The shinobi landed back at the ground and he was quick to work, using his aura as a sonar once more to scan the environment. Naruto vowed to strangle the person who caused the accident because whoever it was disrupting the core. Somewhere in the forest a white-haired girl sneezed. The readings he obtained from the forest were quickly dwindling down his options. He could feel the core being triggered by the sudden changes caused by the forest being set on fire. Naruto knew he could take on the entire nest by himself, but that meant using his full abilities kit, which would reveal his identity as Menma if someone caught sight of him while he called the nest. And there were still 1900 students roaming the forest. For once I really expected my luck to be for the better and for nobody to stir the nest, but it seems I expected too much. Linda was going to be so pissed off. The shinobi eyes snapped open and he clapped his hands together. The hell with secrets. Naruto unlocked the chains binding his own energies, his aura and malice urged outwards from his body, breaking the spell he used to hide his faunus features. Unbound, the shinobi pulsed his aura outwards, the strengthened energy wave was stronger this time, and instead of a rough understanding of his surroundings, he received back a full mental map of the entire emerald forest, along with the positions of all the students. Let's go, Naruto told the rabbit sitting atop his head as the animal nibbled his wolf ears. Far away and minutes earlier at the beacon cliff, Glinda and Osmond were keeping track of the students via the many cameras installed in the forest. The other teachers were spread out around the forest perimeter, waiting in to retrieve any student that gave up or their bodies. Our last pair has been formed, Sir Glinda alerted Osmond, sliding the information from her scroll towards the headmasters, one Nora Valkyrie and Lyren. Poor boy. I can't possibly imagine those two getting along. Still, he's probably better off than Miss Schnee. Osmond nodded, flickering his own live view to that of the previous pair formed. Yang Xiaolong and Weiss Schnee. It seems those two had some previous issues and being paired is not doing any good for either of th. An explosion occurred in the forest. Osmond tiredly rubbed his forehead. Yes. Linda cracked her own scroll and glared at the now lit on fire forest. Now, you can't blame them. They have no knowledge of the nest, Osmond tiredly said, so much for hoping that nothing would go wrong. Linda's glare would have killed Osmond then and there if her anger hadn't been directed at the problematic pair that most likely made things 100 times harder for Naruto. The headmistress hated Naruto's heroic tendencies not because she didn't believe in his strength but because he didn't take care of himself whenever those tendencies acted up. Linda knew Naruto's real strength, there wasn't a single person in the world who could claim to know what he was truly capable of except for herself. And even if he was the strongest person in the whole world of Remnant, as the person she had developed feelings for, Glinda would always worry about him. I'm worried about the children, Osmond muttered after changing his feed to show the shinobi discarding his disguise. Glinda sighed, so am I, but I know they're in capable hands. Naruto would take care of it. He had said so and he would do so because that was his nin, even if it cost him his life. And that's what she hated but also what she loved. His so-called will of fire. Naruto dashed through the forest at high speeds, ignoring the other students and Grim he found along the way, for he had already made up a plan which he would stick to. First, get a relic for his own team. Second, find his friends and leave the rabbit with them. Third and lastly, cull the nest before it posed a major threat to the other students. As it was now, Naruto could feel the Grim being stirred awake by the core, but since it was an earth-type core, it would take them a while before they could reach the surface. The shinobi dashed into the clearing where the abandoned temple was located. There he saw the numerous ruins with chess pieces that served as the relics for the test, and currently taking one of those relics was a grinning Ruby with an amused Blake by her side. The ex-White Fang member amusement didn't last long as she sensed the unnatural power near them. The cat frontis tensed as she scanned their surroundings and found the source being someone she knew very well. Naruto walked towards them, causing Blake to tense up further since she was used to seeing him coated in that kind of power only when he was fighting, and that didn't bring any good memories back. The shinobi felt the emotions rolling through Blake and instead moved towards the surprised Ruby that was looking at his wolf ears. "Naruto!" Ruby shouted, alarmed, pointing above her own head. Naruto would have found her attentiveness cute if not for the nest below their feet. The shinobi placed the rabbit in the red-themed girl hands. "Keep him safe, and whatever you do not head towards the west side of the forest." Ruby tilted her head curiously, but nodded nonetheless. Blake calmed slightly at his words once she processed that he was not there to fight her again and walked closer. "What hap?" "Caw." The trio turned their heads up to the sky where the giant Nevermore that had eaten Naruto earlier was circling around, trying to dislodge something from its back. And dislodge whatever it was, it did. "Incoming." All three recognized the voice, which lo and behold, was nobody else than Ruby's sister falling like a comet from the skies. "Did your sister just fall from the sky?" Blake asked, astonished once the blonde Spitfire had created a crater when she hit the ground. The Ruby was interrupted by the loud roar of an Ursa walking into the clearing. On its back and above its shoulders was a girl squealing like a loud cowgirl before the Ursa fell to the ground dead. The girl leapt down from the dead Grim back and dusted herself. She had short orange hair and wore a collared black vest that ended at her waist, a white sleeveless top with a heart-shaped window between her generous breast with two detached sleeves, a pink skirt that ended mid-thigh, pink-colored shoes and fingerless gloves. "Nora. Please." A boy appeared seconds later from the same place the girl had appeared from. He had long black hair tied into a ponytail with a magenta streak on the left side of his hair. He wore a dark green, diagonally buttoned, long-sleeved tailcoat that is red on the inside, with black and gold trimming and pink cuffs. Light tan pants with black shoes finished his outfit. The boy was gasping for breath and looked a tad bit too pale as he spoke to the giggling girl. "Don't ever do that again." The boy's words fell on deaf ears as Nora seemingly teleported behind one of the ruins and grabbed a chess piece for herself. "Oh, I'm queen of the castle, I'm queen of the castle." "Nora!" the boy yelled again. Humming Ari, and Nora yelled back with a sheepish smile. Naruto, Ruby and Blake stared at the scene in silent fascination before their attention was taken away once more. "Ruby!" Yang shouted after recovering from her impromptu crash. The girl ran towards her little sister, which in turn made her pups visibly jiggle. Blake raised an eyebrow at Naruto's choice of focus, muttering a silent pervert that made him avert his eyes. "Yang!" Ruby shouted back, gleeful that she was reunited with her sister once more, and ran towards her. The two sisters' sweet reunion was interrupted by the orange-haired girl who had appeared between the two at the very last second and scooped the sister up into a three-way hug. "Nora!" Naruto snorted as Blake shook her head. Their attention was once more shifted because John and Purah burst into the clearing, with the former rolling on the ground and the later jumping above him. Following behind them was one of the giant species, clearly enraged, a giant deathstalker. Did they just run all the way here with a deathstalker on their tail? Blake rubbed her eyes and blinked several times as John and Purah continued running away from the Grim. "Caw." The two looked up, nerves already frazzled from the continuous interruptions. "How could you leave me?" Hooked to the talons of the giant Nevermore still flying in circles above them was one Weiss holding on for dear life as she continued shouting profanities not fit for someone her royal status. "Huh, you don't see that every day," Blake muttered amusedly, and Naruto had to agree. "Oh, she's falling," she pointed out the obvious. Naruto sighed quietly. "I'll be right back." Blake raised an eyebrow as Naruto walked away from her and jumped. The shinobi flew upwards and caught the falling heiress in his arms. He carried her bridal carry as the two descended, and the heiress continued screaming her lungs out with her eyes closed, thinking she was still falling. "It's okay, I got you." Weiss Naruto pulled her closer, his voice made the heiress' eyes snap open. While her eyes widened, "You're a faunus." "Well, someone has her priorities straight." "Unhand, you mew." Sure, Naruto complied, dropping the heiress again while they were still falling. Weiss' eyes widened comically again as she realized her safety net was effectively leaving her to fend for herself. Wait, I take it back." "Aw, I knew you loved me," Naruto sing-sang, picking the girl again seconds before they impacted the ground. Unlike the Spitfire that was Yang though, Naruto barely made any sound once his feet touched the ground. "See, that wasn't so bad, right?" Naruto teased the girl in his arms who had gone quiet and was looking at him with narrowed eyes. "You look fummy." Naruto dropped her, interrupting her train of thought before it was completed, and he seemingly teleported behind Blake, where he tried to hide behind the smaller girl. Blake raised an eyebrow at him, a question dancing at the tip of her tongue, yet she did not have time to ask it, for once more something interrupted their conversation as the body of Purah fell right in front of them, followed seconds after by John falling on top of her. "Great, the gang's all here, now we can all die together." Yang chirped once everyone was standing around the fallen duo. Squeak. "Right, Blake, I'm gonna have to ask you for a favor," Naruto whispered directly to ears Blake. Blake shivered. "I'm not going to like this, am I?" "Probably," Naruto replied. While Naruto explained a quick plan to Blake, the rest of the teens helped John and Purah to their feet and introduced themselves rather quickly, considering they had one Deathstalker closing in on them. Ruby had been about to jump into the fray when her cloak was grabbed by the neck and left her feet dangling in the air. "Wah. Not this time, Red." Naruto pulled the pouting girl back. "Why? I can do this," Ruby pouted, crossing her arms petulantly. Naruto rubbed the back of his head awkwardly while he raised the other hand towards the approaching Deathstalker. The Grimm's body was suddenly locked in place by crimson chains sprouting from beneath the ground. "There's something in the forest that shouldn't be here, something that is not part of the test and appeared at last minute. That something is the reason why I discarded my disguise," Ruby Naruto explained to the now attentive red-haired girl. "You mean those two?" Ruby asked, pointing at the two giant Grimm. Naruto shook his head and instead called out the person who most likely knew what he was referring to. "Princess, you should know what I'm referring to, right?" Weiss went quiet for a second as she considered the extremely familiar Franus words. A natural Grimm habitat, perfect place for a dust mine and a massive accumulation of negative emotions in one place. Weiss bailed, "It can't, there's no way." Naruto nodded at her. "There is." John, ever the uninformed one, asked for everyone else, "What's here?" "There's a nest here, a malice nest." Weiss trembled slightly as she continued explaining, "They are things of nightmares, the breeding ground for Grimms nurtured by the negative energy that is solidified into a core that enhances the Grimm it spawns." "So stronger Grimm, big deal." Yang rolled her eyes. "No, you don't understand, you dunce." Weiss shouted at her, shocking the teens at her unrefined attitude. "Those Grimms we fought. They're nothing compared to the Grimm incubated in a malice nest. Just one fully incubated malice nest is enough to completely take over Beacon Academy with the teachers fighting back." Naruto placed one hand on the hyperventilating Era's shoulder and brought her closer. "It's okay, Weiss, easy. How do you expect me to calm down when we could be dealing with the strongest kind of Grimm known to mankind, Grimm dragons?" Weiss shouted at him, trying and failed to push him away. Naruto's hand tightened on her shoulder and he fully looked down at her, his body slowly being coated with his crimson aura and using the malicious energy within him as a lure for the Grimm that he could feel awakening beneath them. "You won't be dealing with it, I will." "Are you crazy? What do you think you're going to do by yourself?" Weiss shouted again. She knew how deadly a malice nest could be. Her sister had explained to her in thorough detail the very first experience the older woman had during her first nest extermination mission, and it was only because of. Weiss blinked. "Silver wolf ears, crimson foxtail, blonde hair and whiskers. Oh. Ruby, John, I'm placing my trust on you two," Naruto announced to the group. "I need you to take the reins of two groups and deal with those two giant species while I take care of the nest." "Will you be okay by yourself?" Ruby asked. "I should be the one asking you that." Naruto patted the red-themed girl's head. The sound of chains breaking apart alerted everyone to the Deathstalker being released from its bounds, almost as if Sync the giant Nevermore that had been circling above them started its descent. "Blake, do it." The cat Franus wasted no time, the clone she had created at Naruto's behest earlier dashed forward. From what she understood, the shinobi had supercharged her clone with his own aura, which would act as a lure to the two giant species of Grimm, which would give enough time to the group to follow and defeat them away from the warzone that Naruto would create with his fight against the Grimm of the nest. The lure worked exactly as he had expected, the two giant species locked in on the now running away clone of Blake into the northern part of the forest, giving the teens precious time for Naruto to explain their role. "Go after them and deal with them, I will deal with the nest in the meanwhile. Come to the western side of the forest once you're done and steer away any student you find on your way," Naruto asked of them. "Wouldn't it be faster if we worked?" Purah was interrupted by a sudden earthquake that shocked the entire forest. "Yes, but that would mean letting the nest Grimm spread out. As it stands, I can act as a bottleneck and avoid the worst case scenario from happening." Naruto summoned his wicked side from the pool of darkness, swinging the deadly weapon as it uncompacted to its entire form. "We don't have much time, go." The group followed his command rather reluctantly. Two by two the teens started running towards where the giant species had been lured. John and Purra taking the lead, followed by Nora and Ren. Shortly after them the sister duo went after them. Naruto and the last two girls stared at one another in silence as the ground continued rumbling. "Take care," Blake muttered finally while she clutched the rabbit in her arms tighter, out of everyone from his newly made friend group. She was the only one who knew personally how powerful the shinobi was, or at least had a notion of how strong he could be. So, she was not worried. "Nope. See you later," Naruto grinned at her, and the black-haired girl twitched before running after the group. "When were you planning on telling me you were?" Weiss mumbled, looking hurt at Naruto. "Princess, once this is all over, I promise to sit down and have a nice long chat with you," Naruto patted the Shini's head. "You better," Weiss shouted, slapping his hand away. "I hate being lied to, so never again." Naruto smiled. "Never." Weiss stared at him for a second longer before yelling in anger and used those emotions to power up her semblance. A glyph appeared beneath her that boosted her speed, and the girl wasted no time catching up to the group. "Well, that could have gone better," Naruto mumbled to himself, activating his own semblance once more. The pool of darkness beneath his feet swallowed him, and for the second time that week, Naruto summoned his Menma equipment and hid his face under his fox mask just before stepping through the metaphorical gate towards the landmark he had set on the western side of the forest. The world spun around him as it regained its color, the earthquake from earlier being stronger now that he was right on top of the epicenter, right above the malice core. Without hesitation, Naruto withdrew more of the malicious energy within him, coating his entire self in a cloak similar to that of Kurama's cloak. The crack on the ground appeared 50 meters ahead of Naruto, the shinobi pulling out a flask from under his cloak, lifting the mask just enough for 5 red-colored pills to fall into his mouth as the crack continued expanding, with grim screeches accompanying the landscape change. Naruto crunched the pills, hunching over slightly as he pocketed once more the flask. "I will give you a reason to fear me," Naruto said to nobody as the ground finally split apart, releasing the first wave of desperate brown-colored grim. The olds were the first to run out from the crevasse, followed by Deathstalkers. Right behind them Tagetis and Borbotisks followed. Naruto cracked his neck to the side as he clicked a button on his side, the shaft of the weapon splitting in half. The side with the scythe extended slightly, and a second blade grew from the outer edge, giving the scythe a crescent moon shape, with Roman numbers from 1 to 9 along its blade. As for the second half of the shaft, one of the edges compacted into itself, giving that side a bladed edge except for the handle Naruto held in his hand. The blade was black, straight and simple, but would work very well for the style he had adopted. Just as the first Beowulf leapt at him, the shinobi left hand moved upwards. The blade slicing the grim in half, both parts falling past either side of the shinobi as the pills finally took full effect. In between the sea of darkness that were the charging grim horde, one single being dwarfed the entire nest maliciousness. And that was him. The abomination. Come. 3 more Beowulfs were the next to follow, charging blindly at him and trusting their empowered skin with the earth attribute armor the core had given them. Armor that was sliced through like a hot knife through butter by the shinobi's side. Their bodies exploded into dark dust as their own inner cores were sliced apart and the shinobi moved forward to meet the following enemies. The Deathstalker that had trampled over its own comrades and tried to pierce Naruto with its stinger, the shinobi merely moved his upper body aside and dodged the stinger which he cut with one upper swing of his blade. He did not let the stinger hit the floor, a chain created by his semblance grabbed the stinger mid-air and swung the body part around in a wide circle, knowing back the grim that had been closing in while he dealt with the now stinger-less screeching Deathstalker. One blade sunk right into what would be its brain and piercing through its inner core had the Deathstalker exploding into dust. More grim continued to pile on the shinobi, but slowly, the team continued walking forward towards the crevasse, where 3 brown-colored giant eyes were watching him with nothing but hatred as Naruto continued his whirlwind of doom. Just as Naruto was finishing off the first 100 grim that had been released from their earthly prison, the second wave of grim rushed from the crevasse. The shinobi summoned another chain that whirled around the head of a King Tajitu, and he threw the massive body at the oncoming grim. The Tajitu was cut apart by its own comrades as they continued charged forward, intent on devouring the overflowing with negative energies morsel that was Naruto Uzumaki at that moment. Sadly, for them, Naruto was not someone they would be able to take on even if they had all attacked together, which the second horde did. And the abomination replied in kind to its numbers. He stabbed the blade to the ground, and the land trembled before hundreds upon hundreds of arrow-tip chains burst forth all around the shinobi and through the entire clearing which the battle was taking place. The grim were skewered, and their numbers meant nothing under the onslaught of continuous sprouting chains from the ground, their armors proving to be nothing but paper against the razor-edged tips of his physical semblance. The third wave of grim crawled, slightly bigger than the previous ones. The giant Deathstalker leaped at him pincer first, and Naruto bent his knees and swung his scythe. The wicked weapon released a deadly wave of concentrated aura that sliced apart the falling Deathstalker like it was nothing. Naruto swung again in a wide horizontal arc, creating another wave of aura that cut the first 20 Grim that had been rushing at him, and then he spun around swinging the scythe for a second time and created another wave. The Grim learned from their fallen comrades and leaped above the aura wave. The sight merely annoyed Naruto as he swung his blade right. Airborne, the Grim could do nothing as the second wave cut them cleanly in half. The fight continued as Naruto kept closing in slowly but surely. What had been 50 meters had been reduced to 10 meters, and the three brown eyes were glaring at him even more hatefully than before. There was a massive roar followed by the ground cracking apart, and all around Naruto more crevices opened, from which even more Grim flooded outwards. How annoying, Naruto growled, jumping back to avoid being corralled. Try all you want, you're still going down. And down they went. What should have been minutes of fighting prolonged to an hour-long session of Naruto slowly culling the numbers of Grim that continued sprouting with every roar of the monster hiding in the crevasse. No longer did the shinobi care about being precise with his skills, which allowed him to cut or pierce the inner cores and destroy the bodies of Grim, but instead he used the bodies of the dying Grim as more weapons with his chains. Right as he killed what he assumed was the 20th wave of Grim, the ground rumbled more as the monster from the crevasse had enough and rushed forward in vain hopes of catching the shinobi off guard. Light shone down on the body of the massive monster, and Naruto jumped upwards to avoid being crushed under its massive body. He used the time he spent airborne to inspect what type of mother-like Grim he was dealing with. The body was akin to a snake, elongated but with various feet on either side of the Grim. A dragon-like head with three brown eyes and thick black-colored whiskers which contrasted with its pale brown-colored scales. A salamander type of earth dragon. Naruto fell back down just as the earth salamander turned around and charged once more. The shinobi raised an eyebrow as he jumped to the side and dodged the attack, which was repeated once more. An incomplete awakening, lucky me, Naruto thought to himself as he dodged once more. Unlike Grim dragons found in the wild, the ones from Nest needed to be fully incubated or near full incubation to pose a threat like the ones in the wild. While the malice cores may create the Grim dragons as protector of the nest, it also meant that most of its initial resources were wasted on them and not tuned for fighting yet, which explained why the mother Grim from Nest repeated their attack patterns before they reached full maturity. The shinobi waited for the Grim dragon to rush at him, and instead of dodging, the shinobi combined his blade and scythe once more and simply held the weapon in front of him. The earth salamander slammed into the wicked blade headfirst, its jaw being cut apart, and with the momentum it had been charging with, propelled the rest of its body forward. The two sliced halves of the body fell apart with a loud rumbling sound as the Grim was fully cut apart by the now apathetic Naruto, who swung his scythe to the side and cleaned the residual blood from the weapon. The rest of the Grim from the nest withered and broke apart with their mother's death, leaving the shinobi standing around the decaying corpses of over 100 Grim. Naruto. A young voice he recognized shouted from the edge of the now uneven clearing. A swarm of red roses slammed into the surprised shinobi's chest, and the face of the youngest friend he had appeared. You're okay. Red. Naruto pulled the red-themed girl up by her armpits. I could say the same to you. More people appeared from the same place Ruby had come from. The surprised faces of his new friends made the blonde snicker as they gazed at the widespread one-man massacre. Holy shit, man, did you really do all this by yourself? John shouted aloud as the group came closer. Naruto snorted, releasing the giggling Ruby and putting away the mask that was hiding his face before slumping down on his ass with his hands behind his back. Yup, lucky it wasn't even a half-incubated nest and an earth type. Hera tilted her head curiously. An earth type. Naruto nodded. Malice nest with earth type cores have a giant weakness, and that is if the core is destroyed, then the entire nest withers and dies with it, and if it's not fully incubated the same can be achieved by killing the mother of the nest. The group looked around at the unmoving, withering Grim around them. So, they're all dead then? Yang asked, looking at Naruto with an intense gaze. Naruto nodded once more. Are you okay? The green-themed guy Naruto did not know the name of asked, the teen offering Naruto a hand to help him stand up. Yeah, I just need a couple of minutes, Naruto replied, taking the offered hand and being pulled up. Naruto Uzumaki. Lai Ren gave him the nod before pointing at the orange-haired girl smacking the withering Grim with her hammer around them. That's Nora Valkyrie. Hi. Nora shouted from afar, smiling as she smacked another Grim. Naruto waved at the exuberant girl before turning to the quite white and black duet standing on either side of Ruby. I'm glad to see you're all saw move. The group barely had a moment to respond at Naruto's panicked shout. The shinobi threw himself forward with his arms extended to the sides and taking along with him the surprised Purr, Weiss, Ruby and Yang, who had been standing in front of him. Lake and Ren being the more agile duo leapt back, Ren taking John along with him as the ground they were standing on seconds ago crumbled apart. The clearing crumbled down into a massive pit the group barely escaped from before a loud screech echoed from within the pit. "What's happening?" John shouted as another earthquake shook the forest, confusing the group further for the sole exception of Naruto, who disentangled himself from the mess of bodies his reaction had created. "The core is still active," Naruto replied to him, helping the girls to their feet as the sound of wings flapping echoed from the pit and slowly another massive grim appeared. "Is that?" Blake gasped as she stared at the monster, her fear being shared by the group of teens. For what appeared from the pit was another grim dragon, the first the group was seeing for the very first time in real life and not from pictures or tales. The massive monster flew upwards into the sky and widened its wings to their max span. Naruto estimated the dragon's size to be around the 50-meter wide from wing to wing, which 10 meters were its body width and its length somewhere around the 50 meters mark from snout to spiked tail. The grim dragon, for it had 2 arms, 2 legs, the wings and the body of one, was pitch black colored with 2 sets of red eyes, one either side of its massive head. Eyes that were locked down on the group. The dragon roared and inside its mouth, Naruto saw the core seconds before a ball of fire formed in the grim's mouth. "Scatter!" Naruto shouted to the teens as they all ran into the forest to get cover right as the beast released the attack. The ball of fire impacted the ground where they had been seconds earlier, blowing up a chunk of the forest with it and setting the nearby trees on fire. "What do we do?" Weiss shouted at Naruto from behind the cover of one tree that had withstood the attack. "We must." Naruto was interrupted by howling around them, beelds appearing around the group as they regrouped under the cover of the trees. "I'm not liking how this is looking," Yang shouted, punching one of the beasts that had come too close and blasting it away. "Two groups," Naruto shouted as he sliced apart another grim one with me and the dragon, one takes care of the grim. "We'll take the grim." John shouted back. Purah and Nora take the front. Ren, slip between them and finish anything that still moves. Naruto gave John a grateful nod before regrouping with his own team of Ruby, Yang, Weiss and Blake. "How do we do this?" Blake asked quickly, trusting Naruto's judgment for a second time that day, since the earlier plan he made had worked for the best for them. "Two of you take its attention and the other two try to find a way to bring him to the ground." Naruto didn't know how they worked earlier and decided to leave how to split to their own. "It's fine if you can't, as long as you can buy me some time." "How long do you need?" Yang asked, cracking her knuckles. 3 minutes at most, Naruto replied, pulling out the flask from earlier again and uncapping it. An iron-like scent assaulted the 4 girls' noses. "Oh, I'll join you in 3 minutes." Naruto pretty much ordered them, and the 4 girls dashed out of their hiding spot. The shinobi stared at the contents of the flask for a second, sighing to himself quietly as he took 3 pills more and crunched them loudly. Ruby and Yang appeared on the undestroyed part of the clearing, shouting obscenities at the dragon flying above them. The monster gaze locked on them and fired another fireball at the 2 who dodged the attack. The game of cat and mouse continued between the 2 sisters and the dragon, with the dragon failing to land any successful hits on either and forcing it to hover closer to the ground in order to have a chance at hitting them. The chance was taken instead by the black and white duet who jumped on its back with Blake running all the way towards its head while Weiss stayed behind between the 2 wings of the dragon focusing on a glyph. Just as the dragon opened its jaw to fire another shot at the 2 girls, Blake stabbed her weapon on the dragon's snout and ran over the side of the snout with her ribbon extending. She used a clone to help herself loop around the dragon's snout and pulled the ribbon as hard as she could. The dragon jaw was forced close enough that the fireball exploded against its own teeth and stunned the monster, giving the 2 girls at the bottom a chance to unleash their own attacks, with Yang propelling herself off the ground with her vambraces and crashing onto the dragon chest while Ruby fired sniper rounds at it. Weiss meanwhile had finished charging her own attack. The glyph expanded and covered half of both wings and the entire grim dragon back. The Era stabbed her weapon on the glyph and channeled all the aura she could into the attack. The glyph shone white and instantly the entire dragon's back and wings were frozen in one giant block of ice. With its wings immobilized, the dragon could not stay afloat and fell to the ground, creating an enormous crater from its own weight and stunning itself further. Yang had stayed under the dragon when it fell, trusting her own body and aura to take the impact, which she barely succeeded in doing so and unleash all the energy she had gathered with her own semblance. Yang's hair turned red with power as her semblance was triggered and she literally punched the dragon chest so hard that the beast's chest was dented inwards and it rolled to the side from the powerful blow. Ruby wasted no time in closing in to slice the unprotected belly of the dragon that laid on its side, recovering from the continuous punishment the girls had given it. The beast roared in anger and broke free from its icy restraints with one powerful swing of its wings, which sent the 4 girls back as the dragon took to the skies once more. "I'm ready," Naruto shouted from behind them. The 4 turned to him and were surprised to see him coated once more from head to toe in his crimson cloak. "Let's get this over with, shall we?" 4 nods and the girls prepared themselves. "White." Weiss understood, creating a glyph that boosted the shinobi's speed as she dashed forward. Black. Naruto extended his hand towards Blake, the girl instinctively took his hand and spun around 3 times before releasing the speeding blonde towards Yang. Yellow. The shinobi pulled his feet close and Yang grinned, right as the shinobi sailed past her, she used the remaining power of her semblance to punch his coiled feet and blast him upwards towards her waiting younger sister. Red. Naruto unleashed his scythe to the side and Ruby unleashed hers, the two hooked up their wicked weapons by the blades and Ruby used her semblance to literally spin them past the sound barrier before she unhooked her scythe. Naruto was sent flying so fast towards the flying dragon that he broke the sound barrier, the monster had not been idle while the group started their attack for it had been awaiting the blonde missile with an attack of its own. The dragon roared in anger and charged the deadliest blast it had released thus far and released it right at the flying shinobi. Grim Naruto's scythe glowed crimson as he sliced apart the attack like it was nothing, the shinobi continued past the blazed remains right into the dragon's awaiting maw and right into the earth core. There, the shinobi focused all his aura and malicious energy into the blade of his scythe. Reaper. Naruto swung. All 18 saw a massive crimson aura blade split apart the dragon body in 2 from head to tail, the attack continued downwards, gouging the already destroyed clearing and embedding itself deep into the pit that the dragon had created. Grim and students paused alike as Naruto fell to the ground, creating a crater of his own as the 2 dragon pieces fell beside him and started disintegrating. "Do you want to be next?" Naruto growled, pulsing his own aura outwards. The Grim turned to look at one another before looking back at the abomination, their feeble minds not comprehending the words but understanding what their instincts were telling them. And that was to run away, far away, from the blonde-haired abomination. Naruto stayed standing for a couple of seconds longer as the Grim turned tail and ran away, he stayed like that until the last Grim left the clearing. Only then did the shinobi allow himself to fall to his knee breathing heavily and started coughing blood. The group ran over to him, words jumbled into an incoherent mess that he could not recognize before his vision turned dark. Winter would admit to her little sister later that there was never a time she was more afraid for her life than that night when the wyvern attack had lit up the starry desert sky. The shiny perception of time had slowed down as she looked helpless at the oncoming attack. Her aura reserves were in the critical and while she could move, there was nowhere to hide from the massive area of attack the dragon had unleashed upon them. All she could do was stare and wait. The blinding light crept closer with the sweet promise of eternal sleep, for Winter knew that she would not survive taking on that attack. Her sight of the eternal light was blocked at the very last second by the visage of the young partner she was forced to take the mission with. He was smiling yet everything about him screamed despair. "It's okay, I got you." That was the last thing she heard as her hearing was lost to the thunderous roar of the attack as it hit the extended left hand of her young mission partner. Winter stared in silent wonder as the hybrid absorbed the continuous attack, his smile never faltering, while he weathered the electricity coursing through his body, destroying all the clothes on his upper body. What were seconds but felt like years to Winter passed before the attack finally ended, yet the boy stood tall, unwavering, unbending, unrelenting. "I'm tired," she read his lips, his smile turning into an empty one as he gazed deep into her eyes. Of being weak his left hand clenched and only now did she notice the chains that had been covering the limb breaking apart. Of being pushed around the young man flexed his left arm. The charred and blackened limb was covered once more by chains. "But above all, I'm tired of failing." Winter's cheek was touched by his crimson glowing right hand, the thumb cleaning a speck of dirt that had been there. Her hearing returned after that, the fatigue in her body faded as her aura was charged to half her reserves. "It's time we end this." The shinobi helped her to her feet, ignoring the roaring monster behind him as it charged another attack. Winter couldn't distinguish the adrenaline coursing through her veins from the butterflies fluttering in her stomach under the unfaltering gaze of the shinobi as the young man continued rubbing her cheek with his thumb. "I have a plan." His voice was soft but carried his will, the emotion behind it made her heart skip a beat. The sky was lit up once more as another lighting attack was sent at them, but the fear she felt earlier was gone, the young man turned around, looking straight at the oncoming attack. And he punched. Winter stared in silent wonder as the attack disappeared into nothing, returning the darkness of the night accompanied by the sound of something hissing, something that she quickly found out was her partner's arm covered in chains. Chains that were melting. His steaming arm was swung to the side, the chains releasing the cocoon and displaying the charred limb yet functional limb that under her wondrous gaze started healing, the blackness receding, and the healthy cream color of his skin returned. The shinobi body was covered from head to toe in his crimson aura, the energy so potent it was bubbling around him, and he stepped forward. Another attack was sent their way, a fireball this time. One that was slapped away by the blonde once it was close to them. And another. And then another. Attack after attack was batted away by the slowly walking teen with his left hand, his scythe being dragged behind him by his right hand. Naruto continued walking until he was standing directly below the dragon who glared down at him. Winter snapped from her trance and with her recovered aura created one last glyph to help her partner. The shinobi feet were lit up by the glyph beneath them, his body becoming 50 times lighter, an unseen smile forming on his lips as he gave a silent thanks to the shini before he jumped. The wyvern did not expect the shinobi to be so fast, the pest impacted its tail and started climbing up its back with its scythe dragging across the wyvern's skin, digging a deep trench that oozed its black blood to the desert. The wyvern roared in pain, using its power to summon Grim from its back to intercept the shinobi, but it was too late, with how fast he was, no monster posed a threat or appeared fast enough to block him. Soon enough Naruto was standing right between the wyvern's snout, with his scythe held high, his own emerald-slit eyes glaring down at the four reptilian eyes. "You're one ugly overgrown piece of shitty lizard." The wyvern roared, but it was too late. Naruto swung the scythe. Winter would later admit to her little sister that she had never seen such a powerful attack in her whole life, nothing could compare to the devastating crimson aura blade that sliced the wyvern in half from head to tail. The shini watched in silent fascination as the body of the Grim fell from the sky, she hadn't even noticed when she had started running towards the place she could see the falling body of her partner. Her instincts took over, a glyph forming right where he would hit the ground and softening his fall. The glyph took whatever aura was left in her and she fell forward, right beside the body of her partner. Naruto felt his fall being cushioned, giving another silent thanks to the shini, since his body was still healing from the punishment he had taken earlier. He knew he had overexerted himself when he blocked the attacks, but it was the only way to keep the monster attention on him. Still, he forced his body upwards, his gaze landing on the back of the shini beside him, her head tilted to the side and looking at him. "I'm not getting paid enough for this," Winter joked, spitting out some sand that had gotten into her mouth. Naruto snorted while he rolled over Winter so she could lay more comfortably. "At least you're getting paid." "You're not." Winter eyes snapped towards him, there was no way the young man beside her that for all intent and purposes had pulled a bullshit win out of his ass at the last moment, one that she knew was running almost empty on aura for most of that last fight, had risked so much without being paid a cent for his efforts. "Nope." Naruto looked bemusedly at the surprised woman, his body strength leaving him when he tried to move and he fell forward, his face falling right on top of the woman's belly. "Oof, sorry." Winter exhaled loudly, the last vestiges of her aura cushioning the impact. If it had been anyone that had touched her the way her partner just did, or not, she would have found a way to freeze them into popsicles. As it was, the hybrid was the sole person in Remnant who had won the honors of touching her. "Well, what do you want then?" Winter asked, referring to his lack of payment. There would be no problem for her to cover anything the young man asked, since she was being handsomely paid for the mission. Now it made sense why the pay was so high. Stupid suicidal missions. Naruto turned his head to look at her, but all he found were the mature woman generous mounds blocking his view of her, the uniform she wore doing nothing to hide how bountiful she was, still the shinobi focused past that. "Those glyphs of yours, is there any way I could use them?" Winter winced, out of everything her partner could ask for, it had to be the one thing she could not help him with. Her fingers unconsciously went towards his head, scratching the spot right between his wolf ears. "I'm sorry." Naruto sighed, understanding that it must be something not possible for others to use. "I see, I still want to know how they work, is that possible?" "Let's make it a date then." Winter giggled, surprising both herself and the teen laying on her stomach. The teen that shot upwards at her words and looked incredulous at her. "Really?" "Yes." Naruto couldn't help the grin that formed on his lips. "You're not kidding, right?" Winter rolled her eyes. "No, think of it as my way of repaying you for saving our hides tonight." "Osu? So how do we get back to the city?" Naruto facepalmed, he should have known, he really should. The shinobi willed himself to stand up, he took a second to look at the giggling woman laying on her back, her smile reflecting how tired she was, but her eyes showing nothing but happiness. Under the glow of the moonlight, she looked so ethereal even with the splotches of dirt and who knows what else coating her uniform. Like a painting of art, Winter raised her hand and Naruto took it, helping the woman to her feet. She faltered, but Naruto tenderly caught her, with how weak both were it was slightly embarrassing having to cling so close to one another as they unsteadily started walking. It took them almost an entire hour of continuous faltering, hushed apologies as their bodies pressed against one another while they used one another as a clutch before they found the closest rural town. Their renewed vigor at the sight of the town nightlight spurred them forward, the two dragged themselves to one of the inns with lights still on. Luckily for them the inn had a room open, unluckily for them, it was one room. They still took it regardless. The two went up the stairs and towards their room under the gaze of a grinning innkeeper who would later speak about how she played matchmaker for another couple, not that the two would hear any of it. The two huntsmen entered their booked room, finding it rather lacking since it only had one single bed, a desk with two candles sitting on top and a wooden chair next to it. There was another door inside that the duo learned was the bathroom rather quickly since Winter called dibs for it. Naruto offered no protests and merely sat at the desk, plucking out his scroll from his pants and started writing his own report about the mission while he waited for his turn. And while he waited, the shinobi took stock of his body and his energy. His aura reserves were empty, his physical and spiritual energy were in the critical, and the only thing that had kept him moving forward for the past 2 hours was the malicious energy that he could feel now eating him from within. Naruto sighed, knowing he had overused his semblance, and the price for doing so would come soon. His thoughts were interrupted by the shini stepping out of the bathroom, the shinobi face heated up slightly as he gazed at the beautiful woman that was barely covering herself with the in towel. Her long white hair was let down and clung to her, giving her a more intense look as she sat on the bed. The two stared at one another for a couple of seconds, neither knowing how to start the conversation. Winter broke her gaze first, fixing one wet strand of hair behind her ear as she thought about what had happened earlier. She knew the boy aura was low from the very start of the mission, having survived a desert sandstorm for who knows how long before she found him, then fighting all on his own against the horde of Grimm while she charged her own attack, then keeping the two alive as the chamber had collapsed on them. If that wasn't enough, the moment she had resigned herself to her death, he had seemingly gained strength from nowhere, strength that screamed of his despair when he blocked those deadly attacks and smiled at her. There was no way anyone, could hold so much despair in them and not break apart. She had seen someone dear to her being drowned by such kind of despair, so how was he still capable of smiling? You know, I have a little sister around the same age as you. Winter started, fiddling with the hem of her towel. She's been very spoiled ever since she was little, but she doesn't let it get to her head too much, she's very strong for her age. The woman spoke with so much warmth that he couldn't help the smile that formed on his lips. When I return home, I'm planning on taking a vacation and spend some time with her, maybe I should take you with me. Winter joked as he shook his head, however her grin faltered for a second. Do you know about the White Fang? Naruto nodded. From what he knew, the White Fang were at first founded as a symbol of peace and unity between the Franus and humans. When he discovered about them, he had been excited that someone was already taking the first step toward peace between the two species. However, Glinda had abruptly burst his bubble with a harsh cold reality. They were no longer a peaceful group, the continuous discrimination from the humans twisted their beliefs and forced them to take drastic measures. Protest arose, and scuffles between the two species broke out. It all changed with the new leader of the White Fang. That man held no love for the humans and wished nothing more than to wipe out humanity from the face of Earth. Under his command, the White Fang became a group that spread fear in an attempt to gain equality. It was a pain case all over again, a peaceful group turning to the dark path because of unjustified hatred. 6 years ago, the White Fang attacked one of our factories and stole thousands of dust products. My father came home so angry that day, and my little sister tried to cheer him up. She chuckled deplorably. He had screamed at her, and the White Fang attacked again and again and again. She clutched the towel tighter. And every time our father would get home, he would scream, yell and lash out to anything nearby. We lost our father to a revengeful man. Winter sighed and fell on her back to the bed, one hand extended to the air. Ever since then she's hated the Franus for taking away the man she loved most, our father. What's her name? Naruto asked as he looked away of the tantalizing view the woman had unknowingly offered. There were no words he could say to cheer her up, so instead he waited. He knew perfectly what they were going through, he had felt it before when he fought pain. Weiss. If you ever meet my little sister, please become her friend, Winter said before she sat up again and gave the blonde a soft smile. I will. Naruto grinned at her before he closed his scroll. He took one of the towels inside the desk drawer and moved towards the bathroom. I've already written most of the report, we can go over it tomorrow and fill whatever's missing. Winter nodded, moving towards her pile of clothes and bent down to retrieve her own scroll to do her own report. Naruto stared for a second, burning the sight to his memory before shaking his head and going into the bathroom. The door to the bathroom closed and Winter curiously looked at it for a second, then returned to her scroll. 5 minutes later after he had entered the bathroom, but she couldn't hear any noise coming from the room. Curious, she knocked on the door and called out for him. There was no reply. Menma. She called out as she knocked on the door again, but there was no reply. Fear grasped her heart and she knocked again, this time a lot harder. When nobody replied again, she unlocked the door. I'm coming in, Winter called out, but the door met resistance as it was halfway open. She pushed her way through and gasped as she looked at the scene. The young man was laying on his side with his eyes closed and his breathing was very shallow. His skin had a very palish tone, a stark contrast to his tanned skin. She rushed to his side and a finger on his wrist confirmed her fears. His pulse was slowing down. Winter's inspection of the unresponsive shinobi was interrupted by something hitting the floor in the room. Startled, she turned to look at the source and found his scroll had fallen to the ground from the position he left it in the table. It was open and there was someone calling. A spark of hope lit in her chest. She stumbled as she picked up the scroll and accepted the call. "Naruto?" the voice called out. Who was Naruto? The white-haired woman shook her head and brought the scroll with her to the bathroom. "This isn't Naruto. I need help." She turned the camera to the blonde on the floor as she looked around the room for anything that could help him. The gasp of the voice and clattering of dishes made her return her attention to the scroll. "Linda?" She was taken aback by seeing her friend in the screen. "Winter, what happened?" "No, never mind, that can wait until later." Glinda's voice was dangerously filled with anger. "I had told him to be careful when he used that semblance of his." Glinda hissed out as something else in her side of the call fell and broke apart. "What does his semblance have to do with this?" Winter wasn't sure how her friend knew about the blonde enigma on the floor. The last time they had sat down to talk was more than a year ago, almost 2 already. "It's not a normal semblance. To use the power of his semblance, Naruto has to offer his own life force to give it a physical form. The more he uses it, the more it taxes his body to the point where his aura can't keep up with the drain it causes on him." Glinda tried giving a short explanation since they were running out of time. Winter gasped, since as far as she knew, semblances were supposed to be physical manifestation of one's soul. At most it should only tire out its user, but never had she heard about one that needed one's own life force to work. "Naruto needs blood, his body will take care of the rest," Glinda yelled at the stupefied white-haired woman. "And where can I get blood at this time of the night?" Winter shouted back. "You're a walking sack of blood, you stupid woman," Glinda roared, closing the call, startling the white-haired woman, who blinked owlishly. "Oh, right. Ah. There would be broken bones if her vacation request was denied." Winter thought of ways to feed the blonde her blood. She was sure that giving him droplets wouldn't work out. He would need quite a lot, judging by how much he had used that powerful semblance of his earlier. Pulling the blonde back up and sitting him against the wall, she disrobed the towel she had been wearing and used it to clean the blood that had dribbled from his lips. His mouth was slightly open and his breathing was getting shallower by the second. She thought of slitting her wrist and letting the blood fall in his mouth, but she wasn't sure if that would have been a good idea either, since there was no guarantee he would drink it on his own. His body was getting way too cold for comfort, and with renewed resolve, she decided to do the most stupid thing she could come up to mind. Winter winced as she bit her arm hard enough to pierce her skin, and she sucked a mouthful of her liquid before sitting on the shinobi's lap and pushed his chin upwards. There was a second of hesitation before her instincts won over. Their lips met. Winter took advantage of his already parted lips and used her tongue to push the soft muscles open. Her tongue found his, and she pushed the liquid from her mouth into his. A few seconds passed before she pulled back. A rosy tint tainted her cheeks, however she knew this wasn't the moment to feel embarrassed. Sucking another mouthful of her blood, she repeated the process. His cold lips tasted like iron, and she mused it must be from their mixed blood. When she pulled back again, she could feel his body regaining some of the heat, since his upper body was bare and he only had his underwear on. Just like Glinda had said, all he needed was blood and his body would take care of the rest. To make sure he would be okay, she assured herself. She scooped one last mouthful of blood from her bleeding arm and kissed the blonde one last time, pushing her tongue past his lips and twirled it around his. She didn't enjoy the flavor too much, as it was heavily mixed with a tint of iron from her own blood. She hadn't even noticed she had closed her eyes as she deepened the kiss more, nor had she felt the hands that came to hold her naked waist, pulling her closer as the bloody kiss continued. Her breath hitched once she felt the fingers dance over her back and her eyes snapped open. Winter's light blue eyes met his deep-slit azure eyes that were filled with a hunger that threatened to swallow her whole, and she tried to move back, but the blonde possessively grabbed the back of her head and pulled her into a deeper kiss. The kiss carried on and Winter was fighting a losing fight as the shinobi pressed forward, twirling his own tongue around hers and sinking his fingers deep into her naked backside, which caused an electric jolt to course through her body. Winter was surprised by her own body betraying her. A moan she had not known from where it came from rumbled in her throat as Naruto tongue lapped every bit of blood he could find in her mouth, and only until he had lapped up anything that remotely tasted like iron did he release the back of her head. Winter dazedly moved back with a string of saliva still connecting their parted lips. It took her a couple of seconds to reboot her brain from the kiss as the blonde blinked several times, the hunger in his eyes disappearing. Though Naruto's senses came back to him, the memories and the rush flooding him at once, and he sunk both of his hands' fingers into the frosty woman backside, which earned him another unexpected moan. That's a nice way to wake up. Winter took a deep gulp, her chest heaved as she gazed at the blonde and noted his skin had regained its tanned color and the heat coming of his body was extremely warm, especially between her legs. "You're okay," Winter whispered, trying to control her own emotions that were a mix of unexplored desire and the adrenaline she felt from seeing him almost die. Naruto took a deep breath which only served to reignite his own hybrid instincts. His fingers twitched and made the woman in his lap tremble slightly as she leveled an uneasy gaze at him. "I thought you were going to die," Winter whispered, gulping and barely controlling herself. His body heat had warmed her naked body which she pressed against him. "You saved me," Naruto whispered back, his fawness ears twitched and he couldn't help but close in once more on the ethereal woman he was holding. However, he managed to hold back just before their lips met. "How did you?" Linda called, explained your semblance. Winter nails dug into his shoulders as her lips parted open once more, her breath come in short puffs that heated up his own lips. "I see, then." Winter kissed him again. What if Godlike Naruto summoned by Weiss harem? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.